And we're back. We're back. Is my mic working? We're back. Oh, and the fan is up. And the fan is up. It's a new mic, so just let me know that it's working because okay, that's louder now. Thank you, Commander Ed. Ground control to Major Tom. I just got some really exciting news. So I'll tell you guys about it because I'm sure you're going to be excited about it too. I emailed Natalie, the lawyer chick, and I said, Natalie, we don't know each other, but my viewers love you and I love you. Long time fan, first time, long time. You think we could do something together on Karen Reed? Because I just loved watching her reactions when she did a stream with Uncivil Law and she didn't know anything about it and the case, and watching her reactions were priceless. And she just wrote back to me and said she would love to. So yay. Weekends are best for her. So maybe we'll do something over the weekend. So I think that is going to be really cool. Natalie, the lawyer chick, and me talking to all of you about Karen Reed. And she's a practicing defense attorney. She's a public defender in Maryland, and she has so much knowledge about criminal law and about Celebrite data. And like when I was watching her with Kurt, she was blown away by the fact that anybody's even in questioning the Celebrite data. Like, really? It's the gold standard in the criminal law community. So yeah, it's gonna be great. Yay. Yay. Natalie, the lawyer chick, and I are gonna do something together. So that's exciting. And I just like literally got her email just right this second. So yay us. Fans up. Fan is nauseating. And what is so surprising about that? Yes, please hit the like button for the afternoon stream. Thank you so much, Little Cupcake, for the reminder. It's perfectly understandable if you forget because, who can remember all of these things? Who can remember? It'll probably be over the weekend. That's why you need to hit the subscribe button below. Make sure you hit the bell so you'll get notifications when I go live. There is no trial happening Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we're going to have to find some other stuff to talk about. But Natalie said in her email to me that weekends are best for her. So we will coordinate a time. And maybe we'll stream on mine. Maybe we'll stream on hers. Maybe we'll stream on both at the same time. But I think that's going to be really, really fun. I think for a long time, LawTube was dominated by men. And I think there are some more women in the game now. And I love it. I love women supporting other women. That's why I'm here to tell you to go subscribe to Aussie Insider. And her channel has grown quite a bit since Aussie Insider started doing these reaction videos of LawTubers. And Why No Court? They were scheduled days off. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week. They did not give us any reasons. There are a lot of jurors, I believe, who had previous obligations for graduate. Look, it's graduation season. So a lot of people are probably having to do family obligations and other things. So this is it this week. This is all the trial that we're getting for the week. So I don't like it, but it's what we're going to have to deal with. Yeah. So at this point, we could be here till Labor Day with the Karen Reed trial. Girl power is right, Fairy Raven. Twin powers unite. Danielle says, I'm in Massachusetts going to Boston for chemo. Oh, Danielle, I'm so sorry. We wish you all the healing vibes and all of the strength and prayers to get through whatever you're battling. And perhaps we can keep you busy while you're undergoing chemo. You can put your headphones in and you can listen to us and we will help you through because we have a very supportive community here. The Insider says, yay, thanks for sending me some subs, Melanie. Yeah, I saw you kind of blew up. I think you found your niche, girl. I think you found your niche. People love it. And people who watch LawTube watch everyone. So it's not really a competition. I think there's room for everyone in the space. They just don't have the time to watch, 4-hour streams all over to get reactions. And so what you do by parsing out the reactions of everyone and putting them all together in the same stream is really fun. Really fun. Prayers are up for Danielle. Thank you, Fairy Raven. Prayers are up. Oh, thank you, Scott. I actually prefer to watch me, Emily, in small doses, and Natalie. Better coverage. Thank you. Thank you very much. As opposed to the men, is that what you're saying? Girl power. Everybody loves your channel, Ozzy. I think we can make this smaller for now. It is so nauseating. Can't they focus on something else like a painting? One of the viewers was in here one day who said that I think her grandfather or great grandfather is a judge in Norfolk Superior, or was a judge, and that they have his portrait hanging in the courthouse. Can we focus on that instead of the fan? Can we start a petition for that? Prayers for Danielle. Thank you. Carrie says, Danielle, I'm behind you, girl. I'm 7 years into stage 4, still doing chemo every 3 weeks. You got this. You got this. You got this, Danielle. Carrie, you got this too. We're here for you. Sending all the hugs, all the love, all the prayers, and all the strength. And I'm very sorry that you have to go through that, but you got this. You both do. Sydney loves Kurt and Runkle too. Don't we all? Don't we all? Kurt and I have done a couple of streams together. Kurt is on civil law, for those of you who don't know. He's going through some things right now because his friend Nick Rakita had some issues, and he's been covering that, and he's very, I think, taken aback by it, and he feels sad about it. And so, prayers up for strength for Kurt as well. Kurt on civil law. He's a very great guy. Been very open about his struggles with depression, and he's a really good guy. Commander Ed, if you liked the morning session, you'll still need to like the afternoon session. It does not carry over. That's right. Thank you. Thank you very much. So hit that thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. It's free. It's free, and it helps the algorithm. It helps push the stream out. YouTube has weird analytics, weird algorithms, but if you hit the bell, you will be notified whenever I go live. Kurt is brilliant. KPT, he is. He is a Constitution. He knows so much about the Constitution. I mean, that's really his forte, I would say, constitutional law. And he's the smart one, right? Everybody has different strengths, I think, as a lawyer. Some people are more gregarious. Some people are more engaging. Some people are more entertaining. Kurt's really brilliant. He's really smart. So, con law is his thing. Ozzy says, Kurt's snark and Runkle's laugh make the best content, followed by Melanie's giggle. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sullivan, the lawyer you know, is definitely good. Yes, Peter's a stand-up guy. Absolutely. And listen, for those of you who like to learn about the law and watch lawyers, there's a lot of great content out there. And I think everybody brings something a little bit different to the table. So you can watch everyone. And I know you do. So I don't find it to be a competition. I find it to be, I think there's room for everyone. And I love how everyone supports everyone else. I didn't come into this as a law tuber. I didn't come in from the law tube side. I came in from the law enforcement side, co-hosting with Duty Ron. So I didn't even realize there was a whole law tube culture. Trust me on that. And although I did watch some of the coverage during Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and I think I watched Emily at that time. Steve says, who is Jack Straw? Jack Straw is a character in a Grateful Dead song. Jack Straw from Wichita cut his buddy down. That's who Jack Straw is, Steve, if you don't know. All About Crime grew up with the lawyer you know's family in Tarpon Springs, Florida. That's awesome. That's awesome. And he's Peter is a civil litigator. He's a plaintiff's lawyer. He's a personal injury lawyer. I got so much flack still, probably, for being an injury lawyer, plaintiff's lawyer. I handled all of these sex abuse cases against the Catholic Church. I'm a civil litigator. For 30 years, I helped injured people and abused people rebuild their lives. Got so much crap from the cesspool of Twitter for covering criminal cases. Like, oh, I'm sorry. Do you have to be a criminal case to cover criminal cases? Because I know all about the law and procedure and the Constitution and stuff such like that. So, all right, they're back. Audio's up. Who do you think will be the next? testify.
Thank you. Please be seated. Quarterback in session.
Quarterback is in
Next
session.
witness, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth called Dr. Garrey Faller to the stand.
No, don't dog the Catholic Church. Who's dogging the Catholic Church? I am Catholic.
Raise your right hand, please.
That was a 15-year fight.
The court and jury, the case in our hands, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Garrey Faller, F as in Frank, A-L-L-E-R.
And sir, that microphone in front of you, you can move that
Okay.
any way you wish. So if you want to bring it up or down, just the wand itself. And what do you do for work, sir?
I'm a pathologist.
And where is it that you work?
I work at Good Samaritan Medical Center.
And how long have you been working as a pathologist at Good Samaritan?
Since November of 2015.
Now, if I could ask you just a few questions about sort of your educational background, starting with your undergrad, where did you go to school and what, if anything, did you receive a degree in?
My undergraduate education, I went to Tufts University.
All right, so doctor, I'm going to ask you to put the microphone perhaps underneath your mouth and speak into it, because in order to keep this room cool, we need to have these fans going. If they can't compete with you, we'll have to turn them off, and I think everybody would prefer to have them on. So please speak loudly.
Can you
How
ask
am I now? Okay.
Lally to find the mic?
Okay.
That'd
So
be great.
Tufts University, undergraduate, I have a degree in biology. That was
And after you received your degree in biology from Tufts, where did you go from there?
I went to Tufts Medical School in Boston
Great school.
for 4 years there.
And after you graduated from medical school, where did you go from there?
I went to a residency in pathology, anatomic and clinical pathology at Tufts Medical Center. So I stayed within the Tufts system. Okay.
And how long was that residency?
That residency was, at the time, pathology residency was 5 years. It's now 4 years, I believe, but it's a 5-year program. I finished the residency with chief of resident in pathology with my 5th year.
And then following your residency, where did you go for work from there?
In 1996, I finished residency, and my first job was at Garrey Hospital, beginning the end of June of 1996.
And how long did you work at the Canton?
I'm still on medical staff at Garrey, so ever since I was transferred to help Good Samaritan Medical Center in 2015. My full-time job is at Good Samaritan now since 2015. But I still cover Garrey Hospital every now and then.
And are you board certified?
I am board certified in both anatomic and clinical pathology.
You've used that term, and just if you could explain to the jury what your understanding of that term is as far as pathology and sort of the difference between anatomic pathology and clinical pathology.
Sure. Pathology, there's two subspecialties, I guess, in pathology. One is anatomic pathology, which is basically if you, as a patient, go to a hospital or have a biopsy, or a tissue biopsy, or an excision, or anything like that, it comes to the pathology department, and an anatomic pathologist is responsible for making the diagnosis for that patient. So we abbreviate that as an AP, anatomic pathologist. So in residency, you can also train to become a clinical pathologist. And clinical pathologist is a pathologist who basically deals with, to put it simply, if you have a blood test that goes to that gets sent to the lab, we are essentially responsible for the quality and the safety of that blood test to help ensure the lab tests that are done on the specimens are accurate.
Now, with regard to your position at Good Samaritan, what is it that you do at Good Samaritan? What are your sort of duties and responsibilities in relation to that hospital?
I am the chief of pathologist at Good Samaritan Medical Center. Also the laboratory medical director. So my job at Good Samaritan is to ensure, quality of both the anatomic pathology side of things as well as the clinical pathology side of things. Ultimately, my job is to help ensure that any laboratory report coming from Good Samaritan is accurate.
Now, the lab at Good Samaritan where the testing is done, is that accredited?
Yes, it is.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what that accreditation means, who it's by, and sort of what goes into that accreditation process?
We are accredited by the College of American Pathologists. We abbreviate that as CAP, if I mention that later, just so you know. And the accreditation process, the CAP has been in business for 75 years or so. They, according to their website, are the preeminent accrediting body for medical laboratories. So what that means is every 2 years we have an in-depth laboratory survey. That's every 2 years, and there are over maybe 3,000 elements or checklist requirements that the CAP will look at in our lab, which ranges from anywhere, for quality, mainly quality control, making sure that we have enough staff members, just about anything that can affect a laboratory result. There is essentially a checklist requirement that we need to fulfill and pass. So that's every 2 years.
And is that accreditation, is that up to date as of now?
Yes, it is. We will be having another inspection. Our window opens in July, so it's coming up. We have a 3-month window where the CAP can come anytime unannounced. So.
And was that accreditation up to date prior to January 29th, 2022? Now, as far as the clinical portion of the lab, what are some of the things that get tested as far as what are some of the things that are tested for in the lab as far as blood work is concerned?
Really?
Many different things. As probably all of you know, when you go to a hospital, you have your blood tested, and the physician is looking for different tests such as like a sodium, a potassium, a chloride, some basic tests that if they show abnormality, that could help them help the clinician make a diagnosis on you. So the most common things would be like a glucose, sodium, potassium, chloride, stuff like that.
Now, is there's some sort of like standard algorithm for things that are tested, or does it sort of dependent on the patient's presentation?
I think it's depends on the patient's presentation. There's no standard ordering test that one can order. So it depends mainly on what the doctor is thinking and his differential diagnosis. He will order, a variety of different tests. Some tests are pretty standard. When you go to a hospital, they might order, a the tests that I just talked about, a CBC, they want to look at your complete blood count.
Just a little louder, please.
Okay, sure. Things like that. Want to look at your hemoglobin, hematocrit, maybe sodium, potassium. Those are some of the really common tests that would get ordered in the hospital.
Now, as far as drugs of abuse, including alcohol, is that something that's dependent upon the presentation of a patient to your facility?
I think an alcohol test or a drug of abuse test is not a routine type of order or test. It all depends on if the clinician or the primary care physician is suspecting could be, drugs of abuse or alcohol on board, and they need to know if so to help treat the patient.
Now, would that also include sort of a patient that presents in regard to a mental health status or Section 12 drugs of abuse? Would that be somewhat standard in relation to testing or blood work that's done in relation to that kind of patient?
As far as Section 12, I do not know if there is a standing order for a routine ordering process for a patient that is admitted to Good Samaritan under Section 12. So I'm not sure.
Would that be abnormal, though, as far as doing a blood draw and testing for alcohol and someone presenting on Section 12?
He just said he doesn't know.
I don't think so, no.
Now, with regard to a blood draw in Good Samaritan Hospital with reference to testing for alcohol specifically, what, if any, sort of policies or protocols are in place in reference to that type of blood draw?
I think a test for blood alcohol is the phlebotomist pretty much has to run through the same protocol that he or she needs to follow for any type of blood test, except for the fact that we do not want to use an alcohol swab to clean the area before the blood draw. In theory, if you use an alcohol swab and you're testing for alcohol, then you can, in theory, contaminate the blood sample with some of the residual fluid of the alcohol. Some people say if you let the alcohol swab dry for 30 seconds, it's not going to contaminate it, but we don't go by that process. We have it specifically in our policy never to use an alcohol swab when an alcohol test is ordered.
Now, in that vein, doctor, with reference to Good Samaritan and the emergency department, what, if any, precautions have you or your facility taken in regard to those types of blood draws in testing for alcohol with regard to alcohol wipes being used?
My phlebotomy supervisor has removed essentially all, not 100%, but all of the alcohol swabs down in the emergency room. So a phlebotomist who perhaps could forget, which they shouldn't, because we have competency policies for them. So we have that in place where she's removed almost all of them.
Almost all of them.
So somebody can't mistakenly use a swab down in the emergency room.
Okay, so keep your voice up again, please, doctor, especially at the end of your sentences. Thank you.
And so, doctor, the removal of those alcohol wipes from the emergency department at Good Samaritan, does that predate January 29th, 2022?
It's been in place for a long time. Before that, there was a policy that they would use betadine for swabbing, but that policy has been in place for a long time, and before that day of 2022.
You've spoken a little bit about, as far as phlebotomists working within Good Samaritan. If you could just explain to the jury sort of what is a phlebotomist and what is it that they do?
A phlebotomist is any person who is trained to draw your blood when you come to a hospital. So if you come in, we train people to draw the blood.
And as far as with regard to phlebotomists at Good Samaritan, you mentioned that there's some proficiency testing or some protocols that they have to adhere to. Can you explain that a little bit more to the jury as far as what's involved in those?
So with anybody who works in the laboratory, per CAP checklist requirements and the government's requirements, there has to be competency policies and assessments on anybody who works in our laboratory, including phlebotomists. So any new phlebotomist, they get an initial training, and there's a or they'll get a training, and then they have to be assessed to make sure that they know what their job, what they need to do for their job, including knowledge of all policies. Then after that, after initial training, our competency policy states that we need to assess them again at 6 months. We do the same thing, make sure they know what they're doing. And then 6 months from that, so that's a year from when they started working for us, and then annually thereafter. So the CAP is, we have all these competency policies for everyone to make sure the lab technicians know what they're doing. We also have competency policies for pathologists as well. So it's all about making sure the final result is that comes from our lab is a good quality.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm showing you two sets of documents. You can just look at those and then look up on the screen.
Okay.
And just in general, do you recognize what those are?
Yes.
And what do you recognize those to be?
There are two of our policies that we have for Good Samaritan Medical Center, one for the phlebotomists, one for our laboratory technicians. The first one is a patient preparation for specimen collection policy, which defines our policy for drawing the blood for the phlebotomist. The second is an alcohol policy, which is one of, I don't know, thousands of policies that we have in the lab to describe how our policy for alcohol testing. Every laboratory test in our hospital has a separate policy.
Well, everything from hematocrit to sodium to potassium chloride has its own policy. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the policy you have before you, that's for alcohol testing?
Correct.
And those two policies that you have before you, were those policies what was in place on January 29th, 2022?
Correct. Yes.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Okay.
Almost seek to introduce in a minute the next two exhibits.
Any objection? No objection. All right. So, Madam Court Reporter, I don't think we marked SS into evidence. Do we have that ready to go into evidence?
I don't believe so.
Oh, really, Lally? You're not ready? Come on,
So
man.
these instead, Madam Court Reporter, will
This
be
is
the
day
next
one?
two exhibits. Thank you. And what is 107, Madam Court Reporter?
I believe 107 is in reference to excuse me. I believe 107 is in reference to the alcohol testing, and 108 would be in reference to the sample collection.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. May I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm just showing you a document as far as some medical records. Are you familiar with those records?
Yes.
Those records are in relation to a patient named Karen Reed that visited the Good Samaritan on January 29th, 2022. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, with reference to, may I approach again, Your Honor? Just
Yes.
Sure.
mentioned to a previously tapped portion of those records. Do you see a result for alcohol within those records?
Mr. Lally, you have to keep your voice up when you're here as well.
Let me say it again, sir. Doctor, with reference to those records and the page that I've opened up to, do you see a record in regard to a lab result for alcohol testing with regard to Ms. Reed?
Yes,
And what is it reported as, sir?
it is reported at 93 milligrams per deciliter.
And is that, as far as milligrams per deciliter, is that a relatively standard way of reporting an alcohol result?
Yes, it is in our hospital systems.
Could you explain to the jury sort of milligram per deciliter what that reading means as far as the metric that's used there?
Well, it means 93 milligrams of alcohol per deciliter of the blood.
And as far as, if you could explain to the jury sort of the testing process or the protocols that are in place at the Good Samaritan, so the blood is drawn by the phlebotomist, and then what happens from there as far as the testing is concerned?
Okay, so
Right, but before you do that, doctor, so we might have to turn off the fans, which we don't want to do. I really need you to keep your voice up so that the court officer over there, so that folks down there can hear you.
okay.
You gonna blame
So
him?
At Good Samaritan, I can go through the process. The doctor will order the test in the emergency room. We have 2 phlebotomists down in the emergency room. That test will print out, the order will print out down in the emergency room. And it will print out a label for the blood tube. It will print out on that label the color of the blood tube to be ordered, and will also print out what on the label what is to be tested in our lab. So that order will be seen by our phlebotomists in the emergency room. They will then locate the patient and perform the venipuncture or the blood draw, and use the correct tube. They'll go through their process of one of the most important processes in testing somebody's blood is accurate patient identification. So within our policy, we ask the patient to state his or her name, first and last name and date of birth. We have them say it out loud to make sure we have 2 forms of identification. Once that's confirmed, there is also a bracelet on the patient, so we'll match it up with a Good Samaritan ID number. So the first step is to make sure we have the correct patient. So then the phlebotomist has the order in front of her or him and uses the correct tube. Before drawing, they have to find the correct vein, a good vein for the patient, which is usually in the forearm antecubital fossa area. They will find that vein. They will cleanse the area with a non-alcohol swab, which in this case the order was for
All
alcohol.
right, so doctor, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop you. I think part of it is that you're saying so much and your voice is fine, and then it drops, and it's fine, and then it
Okay.
drops. So Paul, can we turn the fans off, please?
Are you giving him an acting lesson? Oh, so
It's
now
important that all the jurors hear everything you say, doctor.
Yeah, sorry.
Now the
Okay,
jury's
so
gonna be mad at
yeah,
him.
but speak into the
Okay, I'm
microphone.
going to bring it really close.
All right, this
So,
should be better with
and
the
hopefully you can turn
just
it back
talk
on
louder.
when I get better at this. So I'm sorry. It's hot. I'm hot too. One is we make sure that it's correct patient identification. We use the correct tube. We draw it. We don't use an alcohol swab. We use one that doesn't contain an alcohol in that. Then the phlebotomist will then put the labels on the tube or tubes in front of the patient, then bring it back to his or her area. Make sure they sign their name they initial their name on the tube as well as the time. Then it will be put into a bag, and in the emergency room it goes through a chute and it goes directly to our laboratory for testing. Once we get it, it's called receiving the blood work. A technician, lab tech in our lab will scan, there's a barcode on the label, they'll scan it, and that will put the document the time that we received it. They will also manually enter the name of the phlebotomist and the time of the blood draw, so we have accurate records of what we received and the time. Once that's done, it's entered into our system, and then the technician will decide what needs to go next. In this case of an alcohol test, we're using a green top tube, which has lithium heparin, has an anticoagulant in it. It's to prevent clotting. So we'll get that tube, and once it's entered, we will centrifuge it. And that is centrifuged for about 10 minutes or so, so that we can separate the layers of the blood. In the blood, when you first see blood, it's all red, and there's no separation of the elements. But within blood, there are red blood cells. There are white cells or inflammatory cells, and there's the liquid portion of the blood. So for alcohol testing, we there's an anticoagulant in it, and so we will centrifuge it to separate the different layers of the blood. The different layers, the red cells will go to the bottom, and the aqueous portion or the plasma portion will go to the top. And when we test for blood alcohol in our lab, we're testing the aqueous portion of the plasma portion of the blood. So that's why it's important for us to centrifuge it and separate the components. Once that is done, that takes about 10 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer. Then that tube will be brought over to our machine, which is a Roche Cobas machine, and it will be put onto the machine, and that machine will test for the alcohol or whatever else is ordered on the patient. I think I covered everything.
Now, with regard to, you used the term a couple times as far as a centrifuge. Can you describe to the jury sort of what that is and how that instrument works?
Sure. So when
What's a centrifuge?
the tube that we
There you go.
take is a blood tube, and we want to test the aqueous plasma portion of the blood. And the only way to get that plasma portion or the watery solution of the blood is we put it in a centrifuge, which will spin the blood at a rapid rate, something like 3,300 RPMs or so, which is fast. And it will separate the blood into those three layers. Also in the tubes that we use is a gel that comes in the tube, and it nicely separates the red blood cell component from the water or aqueous plasma component, and keeps those two portions of the blood separate to make it easier for us to test on our machine.
Now, as far as the blood testing is concerned, is there a difference between sort of what's known as whole blood versus serum and plasma?
There is a difference. Whole blood is basically the whole blood. When somebody has a test drawn, and if we test something on the entire blood without separating it, that would be whole blood. If we say we're testing on plasma or serum, we're actually separating the components of the blood by the centrifuge process.
Now, which of the two, as far as serum plasma versus the whole bloods, which would record as far as a higher percentage of alcohol in the testing?
Alcohol, the answer would be plasma or serum would have a little bit higher blood alcohol content compared to whole blood.
As far as the separation that you're talking about, is there a specific area as far as the separation is concerned where alcohol tends to concentrate within?
Yes, alcohol tends to go into the more into the watery or the aqueous component of the blood. So when we like serum or plasma has a 98%, reportedly 98% water component. Whole blood, if you look at the whole blood overall, it has a lesser percentage. If you look in the literature, it can be 86% or there's a range. But so since alcohol tends to go to the watery components, if you measure alcohol like we do in hospitals on the serum or plasma, the value that we get will always be a little bit higher than total, than measuring on whole blood.
Aware of, through your training experience, sort of a conversion that can be done between sort of what's reported as a testing from the serum plasma to a whole blood count?
In the hospital, we're pretty much in the business of, reporting alcohol, in serum or plasma, and we're not in the business of the legal, I guess, the legal aspects of alcohol testing, because alcohol, what I understand is the alcohol legal limit in Massachusetts is 0.08 grams per deciliter. We don't make any conversions in a hospital. We're not in that business.
That's right.
To do that,
Don't do
we just
conversions.
report on the serum percentage.
That's right.
And or the plasma level, and we don't make any attempts to do any official conversion
Right.
to a whole blood level.
You know
if
who
we
should do
did,
that?
We'd have to validate. We'd have to do many studies, and we're just not in the business for that.
They're not in the business for that. You know who is? The Massachusetts State Police troopers. Had they suspected her of drunk driving, they would have sent a trooper down or someone affiliated with the MSP to draw her blood like they normally do. So this alcohol result was a result that was done incidental to her Section 12 ER visit. And that is why he is saying we do not extrapolate these results. We are not here to testify or to extrapolate these blood alcohol results, because they are not blood alcohol results. They are alcohol results. And her alcohol results were at 93 milligrams per deciliter. And Lally said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "It means that her alcohol level was 93 milligrams per deciliter." So, and he just told you, we do not test for blood alcohol content legally. We do not do that. That is not what we do. Okay. Thank you for all of you for keeping us laughing in the chat. I know this is not funny, but sometimes we need to laugh or else we're just going to cry.
And I understand that's not how it's reported within your record or at
Yep.
your facility. What my question is, are you aware of a process by which you can
No.
sort of then mathematically
She said-
convert from milligrams per deciliter to a gram?
We don't do that.
I am aware of that. Recently, I had to read about it, but up until recently, I was not aware. So I'm not in that. We're not in the business for whole blood.
Second
But there
time he
is a
said that.
formula. I do know about it, and it's there is a if one wants to convert a whole a serum or a plasma level to a whole blood, there are formulas that basically you need to. It's a simple formula, but there's varying opinions on which formula can be used.
Right. Varying opinions on which formula can be used. Did whoever did this at the MSP use the right formula? He doesn't want to get involved in this. He doesn't want to testify about it. He's like, that's not what we're in the business of doing. And in fact, I just had to learn about it recently. Do you think he had to learn about it recently for this trial? Lally's trying to get him to testify about it. He's staying about as far away from that topic as he can. We are not in the business of testing blood alcohol level legally. That's not what we do.
Now, as
There are several formulas that can be done. Some of them are correct, some of them are not.
far as this specific patient, the defendant, Ms. Reed, do you have any sense from the chart in front of you as far as sort of the timeline of when the blood was drawn to when it was tested and reported and things of that nature?
I think it was the order was 9:03 in the morning. 5 minutes later, the phlebotomist It happened pretty fast. 5 minutes later, the phlebotomist got
real fast.
the labels printed. Then 5 minutes after that, they went in and drew it. It was very quickly. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but ultimately it was received in our lab, I think, 10 minutes after the order, the blood, very quickly. And then the final result, when the alcohol level was reported in the computer system, was, I think, 50 minutes from the time of the order.
Remember, her vitals were first taken around 7:51 a.m., so they didn't order her blood until 9:03. He has to go retrieve the
And that
records.
Lab results.
Burn
that was
time.
done Pursuant to the testing and the policies and protocols and everything in your lab was 93 milligrams per deciliter. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you, doctor. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you.
Cross-examination?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You testified that, hospitals are not in the legal business of calculating BACs. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes,
And you'd agree that there are differences between screening tests that are conducted at hospitals and forensic tests that are done in labs, correct?
correct.
And the purpose of testing in sort of a clinical setting at a hospital is to assist in the quick diagnosis and treatment of a patient. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
And so your priorities may be different than those if you're in a forensic lab where the goal is to ensure accuracy and reliability at all costs, correct?
I don't agree. Not correct.
Well, hospitals use serum tests to screen for the presence of alcohol, correct?
Correct.
And you'd agree that serum testing does not measure alcohol directly, but it actually measures the presence of NADH.
Correct.
And NADH is the byproduct that's created when the body breaks down alcohol.
Correct.
And the reason hospitals use a serum test rather than a whole blood test is because it's quick and efficient and you can get test results within 20-ish minutes. Does that sound about right?
Correct.
And you'd agree that NADH, which is what serum essentially tests for, can also be elevated by factors other than alcohol in the blood.
I'm not aware of that.
Are you
That's,
familiar?
yep.
Are you familiar with any medical literature that has found that NADH is created when the body has elevated either lactate or LDH in the system?
Correct. There are some issues, in our policy. There are some factors that can lead to falsely elevated or falsely lowered serum alcohol. One is lactic acid or LDH. Another one is Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia, which is a hematological problem, and other things that can interfere with not just any test or lipids, high levels of lipids, or hemolysis, or high levels of bilirubin. But our machines are very sophisticated now. If there are any elevations of, let's say, hemolysis or lipids or bilirubin, the Roche machines will detect that and flag it as a possible interference, or it won't even let us result a test. So with any test, there can be interferences, and I'm sure there can be interferences with the forensic way of testing as well.
All right, so there are other causes of high levels of LDH and therefore NADH also include things like trauma, muscle weakness and loss of muscle tissue, or abnormal tissue formation. Is that correct? Have you read studies about that?
I haven't read those studies, no.
Would would you agree that there may be other sort of medical stressors or things that can't necessarily be captured by the technology, but that could cause error in testing?
I don't understand that question.
Well, you testified that there can be certain errors in testing. That's something that we see throughout all different types of sort of scientific literature, which includes ethanol testing.
Yep.
And there are certain sort of factors that could cause a higher level of NADH that might not necessarily be picked up by the machines that you use at the hospital. Is that correct?
I am not familiar. I mean, if there is, it's not not a common phenomenon. Our methodology for doing many tests are based on this NADH enzyme methodology, and we've never had issues with it. I read a lot. I haven't read about major faults of our methodology for testing. Most hospitals, when we look at when we actually have to do proficiency testing with any test that we do in a hospital. So 3 times a year we get sent unknown levels of alcohol and 5 samples to be accurate 3 times a year, and we're able to look at not only our results, make sure they're correct, but we're able to look at how what other hospitals are doing across the nation. So when I last looked, and it's held true for over 10 years, maybe 20 years, is that of the, I think, 5,000 hospitals that are testing for alcohol, it's over 80% of them are using our methodology, which is the alcohol dehydrogenase and NADH, and I can't imagine if why if there were any major issues with alcohol testing using that methodology, why would there wouldn't be that high of a
As you
Yep.
testified, the
Yep.
goal in a clinical setting, obviously, is to test for the presence of alcohol, but you're not in the business of trying to sort of calculate BAC, correct?
No, we don't. We
And
don't.
So your goals are to make sure that you're screening for the presence of alcohol, but you're not quite as concerned with the precise amount that you might see in, for instance, a whole blood test in a forensic lab.
Well, we result in terms of in the serum. We know the Massachusetts laws and laws across the nation are based on whole blood,
Mm-hmm.
but there are in the literature formulas that you can use if it were a medical legal case that one can use to convert our level to a blood alcohol. We don't do it in a hospital. We won't report a serum alcohol and then we don't do the conversion, but
Mhm.
because it's a very rare event that
Right.
that a level will end up in court.
Right. Because if they wanted to test her blood alcohol level, like we said, they would have sent somebody down there to do it. This hospital, Good Sam, is not in the business of doing this for court cases and for legal reasons. And this witness is telling us that every which way but Sunday.
But there are forensic lab people that can provide that formula.
And when you get a test result from a serum test, that information does not establish when alcohol was consumed, correct?
Correct.
And so you're just looking at a specific point in time to say this is what the serum test reflects at 9:08 a.m. on January 29th.
Correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's all she
So,
needed to get out of him.
Just briefly.
Oh,
As far
it's
as the
never
interferences or anything that would lead to elevated levels from your review of Ms. Reed's chart, was there anything like that present there?
I didn't see anything. No.
Did he review her
And the
chart?
interferences would be accounted for in the sense of the machine would sort of vet them out and not result or not recorded in the chart if that were to occur. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
The form of the question.
It's not
if there's
accurate.
any Objection, you can ask it differently.
Sure. Dr. Faller, with regard to the interferences that you were talking about, what, if any, impact would that have on the results being reported?
If there were the three major things that could interfere with the result, like high lipids, hemolysis, or high bilirubin, our machine would flag that, and we would have some information that a result may not be valid. And sometimes we will report a result with a disclaimer, or sometimes if those levels are so high, we won't report it at all. But in this case, there were no flags.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Anything, Ms. Little, or are you all set?
If I could have one moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
Yeah, that she needs to follow up on that. Right, Joseph. He already basically said straight up, this should not be admissible in court. He said, we don't do that. We're not in the business of doing alcohol results for legal purposes. That's not what this is for. There are calculations that can be done to extrapolate blood alcohol from this alcohol testing that we do, but I don't know the calculations. There are many different calculations that can be used. I don't really know what they are, and that's not what we do here.
I give you such a bad
Oh,
tone about
okay,
your
I'm
voice.
sorry if I. Thank.
All right, Dr. Feller, thank you, and I'm sorry I gave.
No further questions.
All right, Dr. Feller, thank you, and I'm sorry I gave you such a bad
Oh,
tone about
okay,
your
I'm
voice.
sorry if I. Thank you.
She said, I'm sorry I gave you such a bad what? He's a low talker.
Your next witness, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth will call Mr. Nicholas Roberts to the stand. Your Honor, may we approach just while the witness is coming in?
Yes.
Nicholas Roberts, let's see. Who is he? Oops. I don't think he's related to Garrey Roberts, do you? Is he the one that did the extrapolation calculations? I think he might be the one who extrapolated the blood results back. This should be an interesting cross. I wonder if Ms. Little is going to be crossing all of the medical experts, or at least some of them.
Do you solemnly swear the evidence given to the court and jury in the case now and hearing true, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. You can have a seat.
Poor little Mo. Her husband's a low talker.
Voice up really loud. If you're too soft, we're going to have to turn off the air conditioning. Everyone's going to get mad at you.
Everyone's going to get mad at you if you're not loud.
No problem.
He's like, I
All right,
got this.
Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury, sir?
Sure, my name is Nicholas Roberts, Roberts.
And what is it that you do for work, sir?
I'm currently employed with a company called Thermo Fisher as a field service engineer
And how long have you been doing that?
since November of last year.
And so prior to that, or prior to November of last year, 2023, where did you work before that?
I was in the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab in the Toxicology unit.
And how long did you work in the toxicology unit at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
Since October of 2014.
Now, if I could turn your attention to prior to joining the lab for the Massachusetts State Police, can you talk a little bit about your educational background? Where did you go to school and what did you go to school for?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree in applied forensic science with a concentration in chemistry and toxicology from Mercyhurst University. That's in Erie, Pennsylvania. And then I also have a master's degree in forensic toxicology from the University of Glasgow in Scotland.
Now, after receiving your degree from the University of Glasgow in Scotland, where did you go from there?
I returned home to the British Virgin Islands where I taught at a community college.
And what did you teach there?
Mainly chemistry and a term or two of physics.
And then following your teaching in the Virgin Islands, where did you go from there?
I was hired then at the Mass State Police Crime Lab.
Now, when you're initially hired at the Mass State Police Crime Lab, you're working initially as a forensic scientist 1, is that correct?
Correct.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what your duties and responsibilities are, what your work looks like as a forensic scientist 1?
So a forensic scientist, when you're essentially going through all the trainings that they provide at the lab, we do a number of different testing, mainly on blood and urine, looking for the presence of drugs and alcohol. We also do serum conversions and retrogrades. So during your training period, I started as a FS1, so that went up until I was fully signed off to actually write reports that would be issued to ADAs across the whole of Massachusetts, in which I became a forensic scientist too.
And so what are the difference, sir, between sort of your work as a forensic scientist 1 versus your work as a forensic scientist 2?
So essentially, as a 2, you're essentially fully trained, and you're able to do all the testing that we do in house. You also are able to go and give testimony based on the reports that you write. Whereas in a forensic scientist 1, you're still in that training process.
And did you work essentially as a forensic scientist 2 from that point in time till the time that you left the lab in November of 23?
Yes.
Now, with reference to while you were working at the lab, was there sort of an ongoing, continuing educational component?
Yeah, so we would habitually receive articles based on different discoveries within the forensic field. So different ways they would find certain types of drugs in different bodily fluids. It's always a revolving door when it comes to drugs being discovered as well as being manufactured, what's illicit on the street, et cetera, et cetera. We would often get different articles, just research papers based on what they're doing to discover these things within the matrices that we are looking at.
Now, in addition to that, while you worked at the lab, what, if any, are you familiar with the term proficiency testing?
Yes.
And what, if any, proficiency testing would you undergo while you were at the lab?
So we receive both in-house and external proficiency tests. Essentially, the process would be just the same. The only difference would be we'd have internal people sending us samples as if it came from an external source. And then the external proficiency testing that we receive is actually part of our accreditation. So it came in just like regular samples, and we would test it accordingly per our protocols.
And as far as the proficiency testing that you undertook over the course of your time at the lab, did you pass each of those tests?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned a little bit as far as accreditation with regard to the lab. What, if any, accreditation did the State Police Crime Lab have?
We had accreditation. It's a internationally accreditation board for forensics scientists, as well as any kind of lab in particular, and the branch that our lab would have fall under. We have a certain set of rules that we have to adhere to. Mainly, it's a standard known as an ISO 17025. But we have a different accreditation board, and they have narrower requirements because of the type of lab that we are.
It may be pretty well understood, but that as far as the accreditation is concerned, that's done through an external entity. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, with regard to the lab, as far as your assignment of work, at the time that you left the lab, about how many forensic scientists were working within the lab in your toxicology?
By the time that I left?
Yes.
Ooh. So within the toxicology unit, there was one more when at the time that I left.
And as far as you and sort of the other forensic scientists too, at the time that you worked at the lab, was there some sort of rotation, or how were you assigned work as it related to your work in the toxicology?
So throughout my time there, we had more forensic scientists, 1s and 2s, and we would delegate each type of assignments that we would look for to different types of testing. On a monthly basis, we would get a different group of tests that we would perform throughout that month, and it would rotate to the next person as the month at the end of the month. So that's how we did the testing.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to May of 2022, you're working with the lab at that time, is that correct?
Yes,
Were you assigned to serum conversions at that particular time?
I was, yes.
And at some point were you specifically assigned to a case involving a Ms. Karen Reed?
Yes.
Now, As far as a serum conversion is concerned, if you could explain to the jury sort of what goes into that process and what is it that you're reviewing or you're looking at, how is a serum conversion, what is it, and how is it performed?
Sure. So with serum conversions, usually what happens is that we get hospital results. So that would be the police or the ADAs would get results from the hospitals that whoever was attended to. We get the results, and usually hospital alcohol results they use serum in order to test alcohol. Serum is essentially the liquid portion of blood. Let's say, for instance, you fall and you cut yourself, that red stuff that comes out, that has serum within it. What the hospital does, they centrifuge it or spin it very fast in order to get the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and all kinds of the heavier materials out of that blood. And what's left is a serum. So they use that to test their alcohol. What studies have shown is that we actually tend to have a higher alcohol concentration in serum than in blood. So what that means is that due to the chemical nature of alcohol, it likes to stay in that liquid portion more than throughout the whole blood. So a serum conversion essentially is able to convert the alcohol content from that serum that we get from the hospital into what it would be in whole blood.
Okay, but take note, this was not done until May of 2022. Karen Reed was initially arrested on February 1st of 2022 and charged with, I think at the time, vehicular manslaughter and drunk driving, right? He doesn't get the blood until May of 2022 when the grand jury was convened to upgrade her charges to murder. So what blood alcohol results did they use to charge her initially with drunk driving? I have questions because I think that was part of her original charges, right? In February, 3 days post murder. And he didn't even do this conversion until May when they were looking to upgrade the charge. He was never charged with DUI in the beginning? Okay. I thought that she was. So that makes more sense to me then. But again, this witness was not asked to extrapolate these serum results until May of 2022 when the state grand jury was hearing testimony to upgrade the charges to murder. So and did he actually test the actual serum? Because I imagine it would have been disposed of by that time, no? Is he actually just looking at the paper results? I have questions.
Did you have occasion to perform a serum conversion in regard to Ms. Reed's medical records?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Finished? Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that to be?
So this is the serum conversion report that I made with the calculations were made on May 3rd of 2022.
And as far as the result that you received, in addition, so what kind of materials did you receive in order to perform that analysis?
We got the medical records.
May I approach the witness again?
So he's looking at the lab report and nothing more than test the actual serum themselves. Hi, Carla Mass, and hello again from the buffer zone. She says, we are bored stiff listening, but we are here in pink in support. Hello to everyone in the buffer zone. If you are watching,
Looking for the
we send you all the love. We hear it's hot there. So keep fighting the good fight.
So I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 106. And directing your attention to this last page contained within this document here. Is that a portion of the medical records that you reviewed in regard to Ms. Reed's serum alcohol level?
Yes.
And if you could, what was reported in the medical records that you reviewed and using in your serum conversion analysis as far as the level?
The level was at 93 milligrams per deciliter.
And so with regard to that 93 milligrams per deciliter, I'm sorry, Was there also a time that specimen was collected as far as your review of those records?
Yes,
And what was that time, sir?
it was at 9 in the morning, 9:08.
Now, as far as
Everybody wave to our friends in the buffer zone.
general term, as far as forensic science, what you did at the lab, can you explain what that term means, or what you did in relation to
What do you mean
that?
specifically?
That was very poorly phrased.
That's shocking.
What is your understanding of forensic science, and can you explain that?
Oh, forensic science is essentially
What is your understanding of forensic
a
science?
scientific study based on anything dealing with the law. So whether it comes to ballistics or DNA analysis or toxicology, like I did, anything focused or based on the law or for legal purposes, essentially that's what forensic science kind of encapsulates.
And forensic toxicology, would that sort of be a subset of forensic science?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what your understanding, based on your training and experience, what is forensic toxicology?
So toxicology in general is essentially just a study of poisons, plainly speaking. So anything that'd be harmful to the body, essentially that would be toxicology, because you also not only have forensic toxicology, but you also have like environmental. And the forensic toxicology is just, like I said, again, with the forensic science, it's just basing it on things for legal purposes.
Now, through your training experience, are you familiar with sort of the difference between a serum plasma level versus a whole blood level?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what your understanding is of each, and what, if any, differences there are between the two?
So just plainly, your serum plasma level, or the serum plasma is what it's called. It could be referred to as either or one or the other. So that is just the alcohol level in your serum, whereas your whole blood is your alcohol content, or regular BAC in the whole blood. This difference between the two is, like I said previously, in your serum or plasma, that alcohol content would be higher as it would have been in the whole blood.
Now, as far as the milligrams per deciliter, how that's reported in the Good Samaritan medical records referencing Ms. Reed that you reviewed in this case, is that typical as far as how hospitals would report sort of the serum plasma levels?
Yeah, from my experience and all the times that I've seen serum conversions come to the lab, milligram per deciliters are the units that they use from the hospital. Yeah.
Now, as far as that 93 milligrams per deciliter, what, if anything, with regard to serum conversion, what, if anything, are you then able to do to convert that to a BAC or a blood alcohol concentration?
So based on some studies, they came up with a few different conversion factors, knowing that the blood alcohol content would be higher than the serum plasma content. They're able to apply different conversion factors to the numbers that we would get in serum. And we usually get, excuse me, we usually give a low, an average, and a high, being that it's kind of hard to say what one particular person's conversion factor would be between the two of them, since it's dependent upon like age, sex, the water content, what you had to eat that day. So it's harder to pinpoint. Therefore, we give a good range as what it could possibly be.
Right. It's kind of hard to pinpoint because we don't know what they ate that day. We don't know about the water. We don't know about a lot of things. Kind of hard to pinpoint. So we give a wide range.
Pertaining just in case a person converts, or their conversion would be a lot lower or higher. So we give a good range.
And as far as those different conversion factors, where do those come from?
It's based on some studies. I don't remember the actual names of the papers that were thing, but they are based on studies throughout the forensic world when it comes to looking at specifically testing blood and serum to find that conversion factor.
And as far as those studies are concerned, do they come from sort of different population bases? Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's how they were able to get the range of conversion factors that they use.
Now, as far as the water within the serum, or sort of how that works with the centrifuge, what, if any, relationship does that have to the reading that you get, or the conversion factors that you use?
So the water content, essentially, if the serum being the liquid portion of the blood, Water is also liquid. It makes up some of that serum that you get from it. Therefore, your higher water content, more essentially, the lower the concentration could be of that, or lower or higher, depending upon whether or not your water content in that sample is lower or higher.
So as far as those different conversion factors that you're using, this is essentially a mathematical calculation, is that right?
Yes.
And so the different conversion factors that you're using for the low, the average, and the high, what are those conversion factors?
So the low is a 1.18, with the average being a 1.14, and then the high being a 1.12.
So based on your analysis, as far as the medical records and what was reported to you, using those three conversion factors, what, if anything, did you come up with as far as the low and average and high for the 93 milligrams per deciliter?
So our values that were calculated for the low was a 0.078 gram percent. The high was a 0.083 gram percent, with the average being a 0.081.
Now, sir, with reference to the alcohol that's reported in the records, are you familiar with, are there different types of alcohol?
Yes.
So he's saying, based on his calculations, the average blood alcohol content, BAC, in the serum calculation, or the serum results that the hospital did, based on his table of calculations, at 9:08 in the morning on January 29th of 2022, was 0.081. But again, doesn't factor in when the last time she drank was, what she had to eat.
And can you explain sort of what those types are and what the differences are, or where they come from?
Sure. So there are multiple different types of alcohol, mainly based on the number of carbons that are within that molecule. You start off with methanol, which is one carbon. Methanol you can find in like some rubbing alcohols. You can find them in many different labs. We have big, large vials of them. Ethanol, which has two carbons. That one is the common one that is in our alcoholic beverages, and it goes all the way up isopropanol, octanol, etc. It all depends on the number of carbons in the chain of it.
And the type that's reported within Ms. Reed's medical records, that was ethanol, correct?
Correct.
And so with regard to your training experience as a forensic toxicologist, you're familiar with a term known as a central nervous system depressant?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what that term means and how it relates to alcohol?
Sure. So alcohol is what is classified as a central nervous system depressant, and essentially the name kind of gives it away as to what it does. Your central nervous system is responsible for essentially all your movements, both involuntary and voluntary. So the way you move your head, the way you blink, the way you breathe, the central nervous system is responsible for all of that. With a depressant introduced into the body, it affects that central nervous system, causing things to slow down. So that's essentially what depressant means. It's going to slow down certain processes that a central nervous system would be in charge of. So you can have delayed reaction times. It can cause drowsiness.
Ask another question.
How would that manifest as far as a central nervous depressant affecting the body?
Objection.
I'm going to allow it.
Go ahead.
There are many different effects that you could see, or side effects from having a central nervous system depressant in the body. Lethargy, sleepiness,
But he didn't examine the patient.
drowsiness, unable to walk properly.
Why is he being allowed to testify
any
about
kind
this?
of any one of those tests that you see on TV from the police when they try to get your horizontal gaze and they try to make sure you're coordinated. It can affect all those things.
Now we're talking about things you see on TV. Now we're talking about things you see on TV. Okay. Listen, I'm not faulting this witness. I'm sure he's very educated in forensic science. He's just working with the results they gave him. He didn't test the serum himself. He's just working off of a lab report, which was taken, 3 months before, or 4 months before, 3 months before. And he's doing some calculations. And now he's testifying about things that you see on TV. Where are we going with this?
Are you also familiar through your training and experience of work in forensic toxicology with a term known as retrograde extrapolation?
Yep.
And can you explain to the jury what you understand that term to mean?
So a retrograde extrapolation is essentially another calculation, but it allows you to be able to calculate what the possible blood alcohol content would have been at a time prior to when the blood was drawn. Say, for instance, blood was drawn at 2, you could essentially figure out what the blood alcohol content would have been at 10 in the morning prior to it.
This is the important part of the testimony. So if you've been zoning off or falling asleep, listen up now. Retrograde extrapolation is when they take the blood results from 9 a.m. and they reverse calculate it back to 12:45 a.m. when the Commonwealth says that Karen Reed intentionally hit and murdered John O'Keefe with her car. Derek is retrograding.
And that's done with the calculation as well, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, what are some of the types of information that you would need to know or that you would want to know in order to perform a retrograde extrapolation?
We need to know, one, for sure, what the alcohol content would have been. We also need to know the time that the blood was drawn, as well as the time of the last alcohol consumption.
Now,
But what were you told was the time of last alcohol consumption, sir? Is it possible that she went home after she dropped off John at 34 Fairview and was mad and started drinking when she got home because he wasn't responding to her text messages? So what information were you given with regard to when her last drink was? And who gave you that information? Where did it come from? And they don't have that, Lindsay Tyler. They do not have that. Thank you.
in regard to timing, as far as what, if any, limitations are there in regard to performing retrograde extrapolation as it pertains to timing is concerned?
So when we do these calculations, anything that's shorter than 2 hours, we usually don't do that conversion.
And why is that?
Because we're built in within our calculations, we allow for 2 hours. That has to do with the way that alcohol leaves the body. If the alcohol is still being absorbed by the body, we want to give it enough time to get to a point where it's coming out of the body as opposed to increasing in the body. So that 2 hours puts the person at a point in which that alcohol be coming out as opposed to it being absorbed.
So there are essentially three different sort of phases as far as intake of the alcohol into the body through dissipation. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have usually there's a well-known kind of metabolism route to which they alcohol metabolizes out of the body. Yes.
And so can you describe to the jury sort of that metabolism process as far as how it starts to its end?
Sure. So with having, let's say, one drink, what the body begins to do at that point is absorb the alcohol. Usually you get like a steady line that increases with time. So if you think of a regular chart where you have the level of alcohol in the body versus time, which would be on the y-axis or the x-axis at the bottom. As time goes along, after your first drink, the body starts to absorb the alcohol. If that was your only drink and that was it, the body then at a certain point, it stops absorbing it because there's no more to absorb and it plateaus. So essentially the line goes straight. After that point, the body starts to eliminate it at this point. And then your level or your concentration of alcohol within the body decreases with time as it's getting rid of it.
And so there's sort of the absorption phase, a plateau, and then the elimination phase. Is that
the higher converted serum conversion number with the higher elimination?
That was like a court TV freak out. That was not me. So let me just double back in case we missed a question.
For 2 hours ahead of it. We assume that
those sort of signify, or how do you come to those mathematics? And similar to the serum conversion, is this done with different conversion factors as far as a low, an average, and a high?
So we usually just calculate a minimum and a maximum for the retrograde, and that incorporates some conversions as well.
Now, as far as the minimum versus the maximum, what do each of those sort of signify, or how do you come to those mathematical calculations?
So with the minimum calculation, we incorporate the 2-hour period. So we assume that maybe that 12:45 wasn't the body wasn't at that point finished with the elimination. It wasn't in the elimination phase, so we allow it for 2 hours ahead of it. We also have a conversion factor. Once again, this is a study that was done to see the elimination rate of different people within a population, what rate they would get alcohol out of their system per hour. So we implied the lower limit, which was a 0.1 gram percent per hour, with that 2-hour allotted time interval, and then we use the lower serum conversion number, the one that was converted on the lower end. We use all of that in the calculation in order to come up with the minimum. The maximum one uses the opposite, so it uses the higher converted serum conversion number with the higher elimination rate, using the full amount of time.
And these calculations or these conversion factors are all based on sort of medical studies that you reviewed in literature that goes into your training?
Yeah, all of it was part of the training, and they came up with those numbers prior to even when I was hired there.
Tell us the
But
range
it
you
is
came up
based
with.
on multiple different studies in that, looking at that elimination rate.
And so from your calculations, when it came to the minimum with regard to the retrograde extrapolation, what, if any, calculation, what, if any, result did you come from with your calculations as it pertained to the minimum?
So the minimum amount that was calculated would have been a 0.135 gram percent.
And that's essentially reporting in a blood alcohol concentration, is that correct?
Correct.
And then with regard to the maximum, what, if any, result did you get from your mathematical calculations in regard to that?
Wait for it.
The result was a 0.292 gram percent.
292.
And so that range that you receive is a bit of a wide range. Is that fair
Yeah.
to say?
Would you say?
Yes.
And why is that?
So we base those calculations. They're based on that conversion that I did from the hospital results from serum, giving us a good range of values in the first place. But then we incorporate the retrograde extrapolation one, which uses a time factor, and that 2-hour difference using 2 different elimination rates, that causes a wider span of values, and it's just so that it can encompass essentially anybody within the general population, that they would be somewhere in between that lower limit and that upper limit.
Okay. The reason a lot of us are not surprised in this chat is because we know this already. We knew this already. There were motions in lemonade. We call them motions in lemonade because that's what the closed captions named them, and it kind of stuck. There was a motion in lemonade to preclude these blood alcohol extrapolation results from coming into trial. Reason being, the method that the blood was taken, the fact, all of the things that we've already heard testimony about. But the biggest thing is that the extrapolation results are opining that Karen Reed was either, and remember the legal limit in Massachusetts is 0.08, 0.13, or 0.29. So she was either 5 points or 0.05 points over the legal limit, or almost 4 times the legal limit. Okay. Okay. Does anybody believe this? I don't know. She looks small, 5'5". I don't know how much she weighs, maybe $110, $120, $110 probably. If she was 0.292, do you think that she'd be able to walk? Do you think that she'd be even able to talk? She might be like half dead at 0.292 at 12:45 a.m. And every single person who saw her at the waterfall said she did not appear intoxicated at all. Really? Even he doesn't believe He doesn't believe it. He's like, yeah, I don't know. This is what they taught us. This is the calculation. Okay. Nope. Nobody believes it. Okay. And hopefully the jury sees that it's ridiculous too.
So essentially, from those mathematical calculations, anyone within sort of the general population with that result would be somewhere between the 0.13 and the 0.29, correct?
It's laughable.
Correct.
It's laughable.
May I approach this to retrieve?
This is
your
why I need
Yes.
Natalie. Because Natalie deals with this every day. Blood alcohol results and extrapolation. I can't wait to see her reaction to this. But we'll be doing a stream together this weekend.
Yes.
Pick up your papers and go home.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Did we miss the last question? Or did he just pick up his papers and go home? No, that was it. He's like,
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
that's all I got.
Okay.
He's closing, not so great.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You used a method called retrograde extrapolation to reach your sort of opinions and conclusions in this case, correct?
Yeah, it was a calculation.
And that means that you rely on an assumption that a trend will continue beyond sort of observable data.
So the metabolism is actually pretty well studied. So we know that that elimination rate, unless you introduce more alcohol into the system, it declines at that rate, and it's pretty linear.
Exactly. So in other words, certain assumptions are incredibly important for you to reach your analysis.
Sure.
And that includes sort of the timing of the very last drink that the individual had. Is that right?
Yes.
If your drinking pattern is sort of different than what you assume for purposes of your calculation, then you'd agree that your entire extrapolation would be incorrect. Is that right?
Yes, it could be.
Wow. An admission.
And again, those assumptions sort of included the time of the incident, right?
Yes.
And importantly, the time of the last drink.
So those two will be what we use. It's the time of the blood draw as well as the time of the incident or last drink.
And your report acknowledges that the testing that was used to obtain ethanol results in this case was not performed by the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab.
Correct.
And for that reason, the report and those results do not fall under your forensic lab accreditation standards.
Correct.
The Massachusetts State Police, as you testified, is an accredited forensic lab.
Yes.
And so you're required to meet certain minimum standards in order to uphold that.
Yes.
And you'd agree that those accreditation standards are different from accreditation standards that, say, a hospital lab might have.
They can be.
And do you ever work on testing within the Massachusetts State Police Lab for serum tests or whole blood tests?
So we did test the blood and serum for alcohol content at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. Yes.
And their typical protocols are to use whole blood tests.
We use whole blood or serum.
In terms of the machinery that's used with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, you'd agree that the gold standard is gas chromatography and mass spectrometry machines.
Usually with a headspace detector.
I'll let it, go ahead, you can
Sorry.
answer that.
Usually with a headspace detector, yes.
And that would detect whole blood rather than serum.
No, it just detects any volatile substance.
But you'd agree that a serum test usually, as you testified, has a much higher level than whole blood.
Yeah, due to the nature of the substance itself.
And so you kind of have to go through this extra step of trying to extrapolate, okay, how do I convert this to get to whole blood?
So what we incorporated anytime we had a serum sample submitted to the lab for alcohol testing, we actually did the same serum conversion in order to figure out what the blood alcohol concentration would have been.
And that's an extra step that you have to take using conversion factors, correct?
Yep, that's a calculation.
You're not actually testing for ethanol in the blood. You're testing for NADH, and then you have to do a conversion to get it to what a whole blood test would just automatically show you.
Yeah, so we get the serum level and then we convert it via calculation.
And typically in the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, you would do what's called confirmatory testing.
Yeah, so we have a screening method as well as a confirmatory test, correct?
And confirmatory testing means that you take two separate samples and you test both of those.
Essentially, well, our protocol involved testing in duplicate, but that's not always the case for the other drugs that we tested. We essentially have a screening test, which is one type of test, and then the confirmatory test would be a separate test, or sometimes even the same test, just we run the sample again.
And the reason you typically would do two tests is to ensure that there's no error in the testing.
Correct.
And that acts as a fail-safe against false positives. You agree
Yes.
with that? And it also ensures that you're testing the correct sample.
Correct.
And in this case, obviously, you didn't conduct any of the testing.
Correct.
You're just assuming the accuracy of a single test that was performed by a hospital.
Actually.
I'll allow it.
Yeah.
And so if the clinical results are invalid, then your extrapolation is going to be invalid.
Yes.
Now, you discussed a lot about sort of serum testing and conversion rates. Do you recall that testimony?
Yeah.
And you'd agree that the precise conversion rate between serum ethanol levels and whole blood ethanol levels is almost impossible to accurately predict.
For each individual person, it would be difficult. Yes.
And that's because the amount of water in our blood is scientifically impossible to predict with accuracy.
I'm not aware of any kind of test that would do that. So, yeah.
Because individuals are different, right?
Yes.
And so the conversions that you use are based on averages from scientific studies.
Yes.
But you'd agree that in certain instances, people can fall outside of that average range.
Yeah.
In fact, a comparison of hospital serum alcohol levels, they range quite wildly. You'd agree with that.
Yeah.
In fact, you're aware that some studies show that a conversion rate from serum alcohol to blood alcohol can be as high as 1.59%.
I wasn't aware of those numbers, but yeah, it could range. That's why we give a wide range, and you could lie on the outskirts of either side.
And so that would mean that the actual blood alcohol content, once it goes through the conversion rate, would be much, much lower than sort of the average conversion rate that you relied on.
Yeah, it could be both higher and lower.
And that includes that range that you gave, right?
Yeah, it could fall outside the range.
You'd agree that the more imprecise an extrapolation is, the less reliable it is.
Yeah, you do have to base it on good. Your starting blocks have to be good. So you have to know the times in which the blood was drawn, the time of the incident, and essentially what your value was for your BAC.
And the time of the last drink, you'd want to know that?
So we would put that around the time, either the time of the last drink or the incident date.
And so the more sort of unknowns you're trying to account for, you'd agree the less reliable your end result is going to be.
It could be, yes.
And you'd agree that sort of the range you gave in this case, which was 0.135 to 0.292, that's a very, very large disparity.
Yeah.
Almost a sort of 120% swing.
Yep.
Yeah.
That would be the equivalent of, for example, predicting a child is going to grow somewhere from 6 feet to 14 feet.
Check.
Sustain.
It's a very large number. You'd agree with that.
Yeah, there's a large range, like I said, due to the factors involved in the calculation. That's how it gets so large.
And that's because you're acting with a lot of unknowns in this case.
Yes.
He's just honest. He's just honest.
Now, you testified that your retrograde extrapolation assumes that Ms. Reed reached the elimination phase of processing alcohol at or before sort of 12:45 a.m.
Yeah, we allow for, we start for the maximum at the 12:45, and then it would have been 2:45 for the minimum.
And so for purposes of your calculation, if Ms. Reed drank alcohol after 12:45 a.m. and before her blood was drawn at 9:08 a.m., your entire calculation would be invalid.
Yeah.
Bing, ding, 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 ding. When I win a chicken dinner.
No further questions.
Yes, thank you.
Mr.
Sit
Lally?
down.
Just brief, please.
Anytime, okay. Anytime, pro tip. Anytime Lally says just briefly, it never is. Because now his entire theory has been blown to smithereens by this witness, Nicholas Roberts, who did the testing for the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, the extrapolation results born from the ethanol results taken at the hospital secondary to Karen Reed's Section 12 ER visit. He just told Ms. Little, who did his cross-examination, that if the facts that he was given were wrong, the results would also be wrong. There you have it. So let's see if this is actually going to be brief.
So in this instance, Mr. Roberts, you're dealing with a time of incident that was known, correct?
That was known. No, you made it up, sir.
Yes, it was given to me that it was at 12:45.
Right.
And as far as the,
Right. So it's not known, Lally. You gave it to him. You made that up out of thin air. You said Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe with her car intentionally at 12:45 a.m. Those are your facts.
BAC or the serum conversion that was coming from a medical record as far as, so that was known as well at 9:08 in the morning.
The time that the blood was drawn, yeah, that was known as well.
Now, as far as the question you were just asked, if the defendant drank alcohol after 12:45, does that include sort of shortly after 12:45, or how long after 12:45 would it take in order to affect your calculations or your retrograde extrapolation?
It's hard to say where that would have skewed it. It would have definitely caused a different time frame depending on how long after the incident or the reported last drink, if there was another drink in between there. It just shortened up the amount of time that would have been prior to the blood draw for sure.
What I'm asking is, would it have any significant impact, or would there be any difference
Yeah.
if the last drink was, say, at 1 a.m. versus 5 a.m.?
So that'd be a 4-hour difference. So essentially that could, given the conversion rates, that would put the numbers very different. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, so the 5 a.m. would significantly impact your calculations, correct?
He knows what you're
Yes.
saying.
The 1 a.m., would that significantly impact your calculations?
No.
Nothing.
You all set, Ms. Little?
If I could just ask one question. You said that you were given 12:45 as the time that you sort of based your analysis on. And to be
Yes.
clear, that was not something that was provided to you by my client, right?
No.
That was something that was provided to you from a police report.
Correct.
No further questions.
Okay. All right, Mr. Roberts, you are all set, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, provided to you by a police report, but not a motor vehicle accident report.
your
Because
next
guess what?
witness, Mr.
There
Lally?
isn't one.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth to call Mr. Michael Trotta to the stand.
Where's my- Look at us. We might catch up to real time.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Michael Trotta, Trotta.
And where do you live, sir?
Sharon, Mass.
How long have you lived in Sharon?
Long in Sharon since '82.
And what do you do for work, sir?
I am the superintendent of public works for the town of Canton
And how long have you held that position as superintendent of public works?
since 2003.
And,
Snow
did you
plows.
work for the town of Canton prior to 2003?
No.
Now, with regard to being the superintendent of public works, can you describe to the jury sort of what are your duties and responsibilities when it comes to that work?
Typical management duties of staffing, controlling, directing, working on the budget, working on scheduling, long-term scheduling, 5 to 10 years, capital planning, overall operations, the day-to-day operations, what it takes to maintain a water system, a sewer system, the road system.
Now, with reference to, if I could turn your attention back to late January, early February of 2022. At some point in early February, were you contacted by a trooper in regard to a blizzard that had happened the week before?
Yes.
And do you recall who that trooper was or how they contacted you?
I believe it was Michael Porter, and I believe the contact was by phone.
Proctor, not Porter.
Now, with reference to that trooper, is that someone that you knew or you had spoken to before in any way?
No.
And prior to that date, did you know a John O'Keefe or Karen Reed or anybody?
No.
And as far as anybody within an Albert family within the town of Canton, were you familiar with them? Did you know them at the time?
No.
Now, when you were contacted in that early February of 2022, with regard to the blizzard the week before, what if anything was the trooper asking you? What kind of information were they looking for?
He wanted to know what the procedure was when we prepare and staff a snowstorm.
And if you could explain to the jury sort of what is the procedure or what at that time, what was the procedure and what was sort of the makeup of what Canton DPW would do with regard to a snowstorm?
Well, we have the town is divided up into, I believe, 29 plow routes, several main routes, and side routes. The routes are generally somewhere between 3 miles and 3.5 miles long. And we have 30, I think back then we had 39 pieces of our own and probably 30-something private plow trucks. We try very hard to have 2 trucks on a route, but we generally don't get enough. So if we try to have a town truck on a route with a private plow on a route. The private plow is procured through a bid process. They have to have a contract. They have to have insurance, liability insurance, and they have to show that they've paid their taxes to the state and that they have workers' comp. And they have a contract with the town. Then the operations manager is in charge of the on-site, boots on the ground, if you want to call it that. He'll assign the specific truck and the private contractor to a route. Generally, the day before, maybe 12, 18 hours before, the two of us talk. We try to schedule the overtime so that you're not going home at 3 o'clock and then you're getting woken up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to come back. We like to schedule it so when the guys go home, they know when they're going to come back. To the best of our ability, that's what we'll do. We'll tell the contractors when they are expected. And generally, if we're plowing, it starts with a sanding operation. So we would have a sanding fleet, which is maybe a dozen trucks. They'll come in early, and then The rest of the public works people come in at a scheduled time.
And so there'd be about, and correct me if I'm wrong, there'd be about 30 some odd trucks that were sort of DPW trucks.
A few more. I'm not sure the exact number. It's probably 37 or 38 because that counts sidewalk plows too. So there may be, I think there's 3 sidewalk plows, so there's probably 34 or 35, we'll say, between medium-sized trucks and the big construction trucks.
That was sort of my next question. As far as the DPW trucks are concerned, do they vary in size, or what is sort of the range and size of the town?
They'll go from a pickup, 2-ton pickup, a F-150 or F-250 Ford, if you're familiar with that, to a medium-duty 20,000 to 22,000 pound truck up to a large construction truck, which is generally 28,000 pounds. The
Now,
large truck is a 6-wheel truck.
and as far as the other trucks, the private ones, those would sort of be subcontracted out through the bidding process, is that correct?
Yes.
And would the range, as far as the size of those trucks, would that be similar or something different?
They are pickup trucks, usually lighter pickup trucks. There may be a couple of front-end loaders. There's probably, I don't think there's any big heavy-duty trucks, but they're probably pickups, might be couple of Jeeps, pickups. Again, a medium-duty like an F-350 or F-450 pickup. Those are Fords, and loaders.
Now, with respect to questions or what you were asked about by the trooper, was there a specific sort of street or plow route that the trooper was inquiring about?
I believe he asked who was down, that's Fairview, or down in the Cedar Crest area, that's what we call it. I believe that's what he asked me.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Thank you, Justin Green, for the Cash App. Appreciate you. And for Fahima for buying me a matcha latte and says I'm doing a fantastic job. Thank you, Fahima. Love you all so very much. Christine wants to know, thanks for the super chat. I'm sorry, but how do we even really know that they really had Karen's blood? I have questions. Thank you, Christine. Donna is singing to us, help, I'm stepping into the twilight zone. Thanks, Donna, for your super chat.
I'm showing you a document. Just look at that, look up when you finish.
Welcome, Joanne became a new member.
Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes, sir.
And what do you recognize it to be?
This would be a plow plan for that day. It's a plow plan for the season, but it is particularly a plow plan for that storm of January 28th through January 29 of 2022.
They have a plan. They had a
May I
plan.
approach you, Your Honor?
Yes.
They actually had a plan in place.
Submit it tonight. Exhibit.
I have no objection.
Thank you.
He does remind me of Coach from Cheers, too. Miss Gilman, is she sweating? Oh, she's not happy. Like, it is hot in there.
Exhibit 109. Just have a couple questions for you in regard to what's listed there. So with regard to the top of the page, there's a listing as far as 1/28/2022 Boulevard 11 p.m. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And what does that mean?
That means that the first group of Workforce, which would be the Sanders, were scheduled to come in at 11 o'clock that night.
Now, as far as the next entry going across the top of the page has 1/29/2022, is that correct?
Yes,
And as far as what's listed as WNS/BM/REC at 2 a.m., what does that mean?
W and S would be water and sewer. BM would be building maintenance. REC would be the rec, and they are scheduled, that would be the balance of the Canton's workforce. They were scheduled to come in at 2 o'clock in the morning.
And that 2 a.m., would that be at the same sort of central location? of
Yes,
all
they
of
would all report to the Bolivar Street garage. I think that address is 150 Bolivar Street.
Now, as far as the next listing, it states contractors at 3 a.m., is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And who is that referring to?
That would refer to all the private contractors that would be plowing that day. So again, it's staged.
And sort of the last sort of notation on the top of that, it indicates out at 5 a.m., 1/30/2022. Is that correct?
That would be when we completed and everybody went home.
Now,
I think a lot of
with
things might be
reference to
staged.
The Cedar Crest neighborhood or the area that would include Fairview Road. There's different route numbers that are assigned, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And which route number would include Fairview?
That would be Lower Cedar Crest, number 11.
And from that, that would include Lower Cedar Crest, Kings, Fairview, and Spring, correct?
Yes.
And as far as the vehicles and the vehicle types that were assigned to that route pursuant to this list, what types were they and who was assigned to?
Truck 30, which would be a town of Canton truck. That's a 43 International. Brian Lochran would be the driver. The 43 International is a medium duty truck. The next up would be 7400 International. That would be the large construction truck. And there is an absolute, a by the yard 4x6, which is I believe that's a small 1-ton dump. That would have been the private contractor that was on the route with that.
Brian Loughran, Brian Loughran, aka Lucky Loughran, has entered the chat. My friends, Lucky Loughran is the plow driver, the snow plow driver that was assigned to 34 Fairview that night.
With the city truck.
And so that truck 30, the 4300 International, is that a bigger truck or a smaller truck than the 1-ton?
Then please again? Then the 1-ton?
Yes.
It's a larger truck. It's a, like a 3 to 5 cubic yard truck. And the large truck is like an 8 to 10 cubic yard dump. That's a dump truck.
And as far as the height on that International, would that be, how much would it be? Taller or shorter than say a 1-ton dump?
If you want, I would estimate that if you're sitting in the driver's seat of a car, you're probably 2.5 feet. When you're sitting in the driver's seat of a 1-ton, you're somewhere around 3 feet. When you're sitting in the driver's seat of this 4300, you're probably somewhere around 4 to 4.5 feet. And when you're sitting in the big construction truck, you're another 8 to 10 inches, 5 feet plus.
Now, when you're driving or when the plow drivers are plowing the roads, what, if any, sort of instructions are they given as far as how to first start plowing the roads when they first come upon sort of dropping the plows and going?
If we're in a plowable situation, which is kind of hard to define, it's generally when we feel that traffic is impeded or may not be able to safely get up and down the street. So that's probably anywhere around 2 inches. They're instructed, and we're expecting a heavy snow. they're instructed to plow the middle of the road, keep the middle of the road open, and as they make their way through the route, they're supposed to push back a little bit. If they try to clean a whole lane and then come back and do the lane again, generally they end up being in trouble and they can't keep up if it's a heavy snow. So they're instructed to plow the middle of the road, to keep the roads open as much as they can before they do their finished cleanup.
If I may have one moment, Sean?
Yes.
I'll take all the moments. He's up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to get lucky.
Eddie?
Thank you, Ron.
And that's it.
Thank you, sir. No further questions.
All right, Mr. Yannetti?
Thank you, Ron.
Good afternoon, Mr. Trotta. Sir, Michael Proctor called you on February 3rd of 2022. Does that sound right?
It may be, I'm not sure of the date.
It was within days of the big snowstorm, correct?
Yes.
You knew that he was investigating the death of John O'Keefe, which had occurred on January 29th, correct?
I did not know that.
Had you heard that there was a police officer who was found dead on the lawn of another police officer in Canton?
Well, I knew, yes, I knew,
It's fairly big news at the time,
yes.
correct?
February 3rd was after Karen Reed was arrested for John O'Keefe's murder. She was arrested on February 1st, arraigned on February 2nd. They don't even go. Proctor doesn't even go to the Department of Public Works to talk to the superintendent about plow drivers until February 3rd. Let that sink in.
And were you aware that that was why Michael Proctor was calling you related to that investigation?
After he called and identified himself, he said that is why he was calling.
Of course. Now, you spoke with him over the phone only, correct?
Yes,
He never came down to the DPW to meet you in person, correct?
not me, no.
And he never asked to interview any of your employees, correct?
We may have discussed who was on that route and who plowed, but I'm not sure at that time if he had told me he was going to go talk to anybody else.
Oh, so it's your testimony that you may have told him the identity of the plow driver when you spoke with him on February 3rd over the phone.
Interesting.
I may have, but I am not positive.
You don't
Wow.
have a memory of him asking you who the plow driver was.
He asked, no, I don't have a memory of his exact questions.
But leaving aside the exact wording of his questions, it's fair to say you don't have a memory of him asking you who plowed Fairview Road on January 29th. Is that fair to say?
He asked me about, I believe he asked me about this plow list,
About the what? The plow list?
this plow list.
Right, but on the plow list, there's the name by the yard, correct?
Yes,
All right. There's also, to the left of that, an indication of the name of the plow driver, and it's just a first name and a last initial,
Yes.
correct?
yes,
It doesn't spell out the whole last name, does it?
no,
But you know the full last name, correct?
yes,
You have a limited number of employees, right? It's not a 1,000-person company, right?
yes,
All right. And you're well familiar that Brian L. is Brian Laughlin, right?
yes.
As you sit here today, do you have any memory of whether the name Brian Laughlin was brought up during that phone call with Michael Proctor?
I may have said to him, that's who BL was, but I did I believe I referred him to the operations manager to double check who was on plowing that day.
Oh.
You say you may have mentioned the name Brian L. or Brian Laughlin, but again, I'm just trying to drill down on what your memory is. Do you have a memory one way or the other as to whether the name Brian Laughlin came up in that conversation?
If you are asking me, do I remember 100%? No.
Okay. In any case, Trooper Proctor, Michael Proctor, never asked to speak with Brian Laughlin when he talked to you over the phone,
He
correct?
did not ask me, no.
I'm going to allow the question and answer.
And how short was that phone call with Michael Proctor?
If I tell you, you're going to ask me, how do I know for sure? I would
Okay.
say
So nervous.
A few minutes, whatever a few minutes is.
I'm going to accept that answer. And you would agree with me that after, and you, by the way, you were trying to be helpful, correct?
Yes,
After that couple or 3-minute phone conversation, you'll agree with me that Michael Proctor never followed up again with you personally.
that's a good question. I am not sure.
Okay. Well, I'd like to direct your attention to about a week and a half later, specifically the date of February 14th of 2022, which maybe you don't remember the precise date, but around that time period, you came into work around that time period, and you learned that a defense investigator named Paul Mikowski had left his business card for you with somebody on the DPW staff, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. Ask it differently.
Yes.
I do not,
He's going to answer it anyway.
Don't answer that question. I think he's going to ask when the appropriate one for you to answer, okay?
Do you recall when you came into work receiving a business card from Paul Mikowski?
no,
Do you recall calling Paul Mikowski back?
no,
Do you recall speaking to any investigator from the defense at any point within a couple of weeks after you spoke to Trooper Proctor?
no,
Do you deny telling Paul Mikowski to call Bill Walsh?
Objection.
Sustained.
Who is Bill Walsh?
Billy Walsh is the operations manager for
Is he
the,
the highway department supervisor?
yes,
Did the name Bill Walsh ever come up in your conversation with Michael Proctor back on February 3rd?
Objection.
Did that name come up when you first spoke with Trooper Proctor?
again, I believe I mentioned it, but I am not positive.
And is it fair to say that the Canton DPW has their own plowing and sanding trucks?
Yes,
Does one of them in particular have a nickname?
if they do, I don't know what they are.
Frankenstein.
One of your trucks being called Frankenstein.
Objection.
Sustained.
We knew Frankenstein. We know Frankenstein.
Correct?
No, I do not.
But Brian Laughlin does?
Yes, he does.
And Brian Laughlin was driving the truck that plowed Fairview on January 29th of
Yes.
2022?
Objection.
Let me have a moment.
Yes. It'll stand. The answer will stand this time.
Okay. Brian Laughlin was
Let me just have a moment.
plowing Fairview. This witness believes that he told Proctor that. And then when the private investigator for the defense, Paul Mikowski, went to the Department of Public Works to investigate further,
The witness or the sidebar?
The witness.
Yes.
Sorry.
Paul Mikowski was told to contact Billy Walsh, the highway department supervisor.
Well, I have, yeah,
Do you have reading glasses as well? Or
well, I have, yes, but
you're able to read the exhibit that you have in front of you?
yes,
Terrific.
Do you have reading glasses?
I'm handing you another document, sir. And I would ask if you would compare that document with the document you have in front of you and tell the jury if it's the same document or not.
More fake documents? More fake documents? More doctored, proctored documents? Oh, wow. Paul Michael Trotta.
yes, is to be.
He's been
It
asked.
appears to be,
Does it appear to be identical?
yes.
I will take the one back that does not have the exhibit sticker on it. Thank you, sir. And I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any follow-up, Mr. Lally?
No, Your Honor, but may I just retrieve the exhibit?
Yes. All right, Mr. Trotto, you are all set, sir. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
You have another witness here, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, your next witness, please.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth call Mr. Louis Jutras to the stand.
Brian Lochran is Lucky Lochran, the plow driver. I think there's a pandemic going around this courtroom for real. Like, these people are coughing to death. Is it like influenza B or A or C or something going around? Because everyone is going to get sick that's sitting in that courtroom.
All right, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Louis Jutras, Jutras.
And where do you live, sir?
Stoughton, Massachusetts.
And how long have you lived in Stowe?
About 23 years.
And what is it that you do for work, sir?
I work for the town of Canton. I am the manager of the Information Systems Division of the Finance Department.
And
The
how
what?
long
What
have you
was-
been
I'm
doing
sorry,
that?
what was the last part?
Of the Finance Department.
Thank you.
And sir, how long have you held that position?
Almost 25 years.
Now, if you could explain to the jury, just as far as your job is concerned, what does that relate to, or what is it that you do as a director of professional service?
Sure. So my responsibilities are for the municipal departments and all the technology associated with that.
And does that include everything sort of from cell phones to GPS in town vehicles to security systems, things of that nature?
Yes.
Now, with reference to your department, how many people work in your department?
There's 3 of us in total, myself and 2 others.
Do you essentially supervise the other 2 people as well?
Yes.
Now,
Any Duty Ron fans in the chat? Doesn't he kind of remind you of Ed Wallace a little bit? Anyone? I can't unsee it now that I've just thought of it. Maybe it's his voice or something.
at some point, if I could turn your attention to around the time of January 29th, 2022, some point after that, did someone from law enforcement or from a police department reach out to you in regard to security cameras or camera systems within the town of Canton?
Yes, I received a notification from the Lieutenant Gallagher that there was a motor vehicle incident in town, that the state police would be looking for some video footage.
And so you received an initial notification from Lieutenant Gallagher telling you that the state police will be reaching out looking for video.
Correct.
Okay, this is
Sometime
why
shortly after
Lally takes so long. Because after he asks a question and the witness answers, he summarizes their answer in another question. Okay, we could be done in half the time if he could just learn how to ask a question, receive an answer, then ask another question. It's infuriating. It's infuriating me. I can't imagine how the jury feels.
that, did you receive any sort of, did anybody from the state police reach out?
Yes, Trooper Donna reached out. We had a phone conversation, and we had email correspondence relative to dates and times. We had pulled some footage from one site in Pequaside Farm that was put together. And then after that, there was a request for anything facing Washington Street, either from Town Hall or from the library.
And so as far as what was relayed to you by Trooper Dunn, what was sort of the description, or what was it that you, were they asking just specifically timeframes, or did you get any other information as far as what you were looking for?
From what I recall, there were 2 different timeframes, between 12 and 1, and then between 5 and 6. That was in our discussion and correspondence relative to Town Hall.
And just to be clear, that's from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. and then 5 a.m. to 6 a.m.
Correct.
Now, as far as the Peckwitside Farm,
Mhm.
describe to the jury sort of what kind of location that is, or what kind of town property it is, and where it is in relation to the town.
Yes, so the physical area is off of Pleasant Street, which intersects with Washington Street, closest to Dedham Street and the police department. That's a large area, big white house, and we have cameras that, face the entrance, the street, and the surrounding building.
As far as the coverage from those cameras, have you had occasion on either this occasion or prior occasions or subsequent occasions to look at sort of the view that the camera gets from Peckwitside Farm?
Yes, yeah, we have a straight shot down from the building, down the entrance driveway, right to the street. The other cameras that are around there's a couple of doorbell type cameras that physically focus on specific sections, and then other ones cover the general grounds around the building in the backside.
All right. So can I interrupt for a minute, sir? Could you please spell the name of the farm?
Yep, Pequiside, Pequitside.
Thank you.
Sir, is it, Mr. Jutras, is it fair to say that the Pequitside Farm cameras cover more of the property and less of the street out in front? Is that correct?
Yes,
Now, as far as that was the initial request was in regard to Pequitside, is that correct?
correct.
And so the subsequent request, what was that in regard to?
That was for anything town hall or library that physically faced Washington Street.
And so the town hall and the library, sort of where are they situated in relation to each other and in relation to Washington Street?
Yep, so they physically abut on either side of Washington Street, right at the intersection of Sherman. They are diagonal to each other.
Now, as far as the recording devices or the cameras on town buildings within the town of Canton, are they sort of uniform or does it vary from location to location or vary within the location?
The physical model of the recorder, as far as the manufacturer, that is the same that we have across 15 different sites. The types of cameras do change, interior, exterior, doorbell, things like that. But all the actual recording units are of the same manufacturer, just different sizes and models.
And as far as the town hall and the public library cameras, as far as the exterior cameras at least, they face in that area of Washington Street and actually capture portions of Washington Street?
Yes, yep.
Don't worry, KPT, it's going to make sense soon.
Now, as far as the cameras are concerned, particularly the exterior cameras that we're talking about as far as the library and the town hall, how are they sort of set up to record? Is it one continuous recording? Are they motion activated? How are they?
Yes, the cameras, based on size and so on, they are all set up for motion in pretty much all of our locations.
And as far as from your review of those cameras, is there any sort of indication on the footage as far as date and timestamp or anything like that?
Yes, we usually have it in one of the corners or someplace along when we have the video saved off and exported.
And when you were able to pull the video that the troopers were requesting, the date and timestamp affixed to those videos, was that accurate as to what the date and timestamp actually was at the time that it's recording?
Yes, I would believe so.
And sort of those date and timestamps, you know where they come from? Right.
The system is linked to a time server, which is remote and is used from the national standards.
Now, as far as the video is concerned from those, they're motion activated, but how far back do they go as far as how many days pass before, does it get sort of overwritten at some point?
Yes, depending on the site, most of them, because of the motion activated, because of, various request types and so on, and the number of the cameras, we usually try to get about 30 days. There are some that go longer because the site is or isn't used as much. And then there are other ones where, specifically with the library, they only requested to have a maximum of 30 days on that device.
And so when you received this request from the troopers, that was well within the 30 days, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, because we're talking February 7th for the last request.
Now, as far as the video that you exported, well, let me ask you this. As far as when you were asked to retrieve that video, can you explain sort of mechanically the process, how you got that video and how you delivered that to the troopers?
Yeah, so specifically for the town and the library one, that again, timeframe provided, using the manufacturer's software product, doing the search, picking the cameras that are facing the Washington Street side, and then having the time frame and exporting that out. That becomes, depending on the size of it, either a full executable that can just be opened and viewed, or a combination of files that has a player with it. And then based on the fact that we had already put videos together and that material was picked up, I had sent a file share link for that information.
You had sent that file share link to Trooper Dunn, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, as far as the video that you reviewed, were you sort of parsing or were you looking for specific areas, or did you just sort of take the whole time period requested and send that off to the trooper?
As far as I recall, it was the whole time frame, just because we only have 2 cameras or so that physically cover the area in question, and he had 2 separate hours in question as well. So they were able to be exported and sent.
Now, as far as this particular video, this is video only, correct? There's no audio that's attached to these cameras?
Correct, no audio.
Now, as far as access to these cameras and the footage within the cameras, who, if anyone besides yourself, would have access to remove any sort of footage from the cameras?
No one.
No one except you? Like someone pointed out, why is Lieutenant Gallagher contacting him when Canton PD was conflicted out? Hold on. I gotta stop this. I hate talking over it. It's annoying. I know it's annoying. It annoys me too. Why is Lieutenant Gallagher contacting him? Isn't Lieutenant Gallagher with Canton PD? Why would he be contacting him for this video footage if Canton PD was conflicted out on the 29th? Questions. And why is this last request on February 7th and Karen's already been arrested? So, you know, they didn't think to look for any of this stuff before they arrested her, of course. No, why would they?
Area. In relation to also within sort of the ambit of your duties and responsibilities would include GPS on town trucks, correct?
Yes, Public Works has a setup via their radios for GPS information.
And so with regard to that, specifically the DBW trucks, what, if any, information did you receive from anyone at the DBW in relation to those GPS devices within the trucks shortly after the snowstorm from the 28th and the 29th of January?
Yep. So on February 1st, I received notification from the operations manager that the GPS information was not working.
And so you received information after the snowstorm that it wasn't working during the snowstorm, is that correct?
Correct.
On the snowplow trucks.
And as far as that, as far as GPS sort of going down in the DPW trucks, is that abnormal, or how often would that occur?
Yes, it happens several times throughout the year for various reasons. They have a radio repeater. It's connected through a network. It runs software on a server that we have in-house. Server's rebooted, network goes down, things that, change for various reasons, and we need to reestablish connection to whatever recorder it is for that repeater, and then the information is then picked up.
Now, taking you back to the Canton Public Library video that you provided to the trooper, were you told anything about sort of any type of vehicle or anything to be looking for within that particular video time frame that they were asking about?
Not that I recall.
Did you recall ever actually watching the video yourself as far as confirming sort of what it was?
Yes, I mean, I watched it from the time frame to see that we had information, watched it just to move forward to the end to make sure there was information, and when the recording, was physically available. but what was in it, no.
He didn't even look at it.
May I approach?
Yes.
As far as that video from the Canton Public Library, you've seen that video subsequently, is that correct?
This disc with the wording on it?
Yes.
No, I have not seen this.
He's
Not
never
that
seen it.
specific disc, I'm sorry, sir, but the footage, have you been shown that particular video footage, or did you review that footage before you gave it to the troopers?
This is not mine to the trooper.
Yeah, he doesn't even know what that is. Lally, hello. He just said he's never seen that disc before. You can then question him if he's seen what's on the disc, if he's never even seen the disc. Have we entered the failing class of trial law level 1? I mean, he just said he's never seen what's on that disc. You can't continue to question him about it. Even the witness is smarter than Lally at this point.
Understood. May we approach?
Yeah, may we approach? The witness doesn't know what you're showing him, so therefore he can't question. You can't question him on it, and therefore, sorry, you lose. It's called an L for lose. You lose, Lally. Right, he gave
All
Proctor a
right,
thumb
so the
drive.
parties agree that this is the next exhibit, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Well, the defense is being awfully nice about consenting.
Thanks.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would just ask to briefly, publish
Done.
portions from those.
Hold on. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have the first video portion.
I'm gonna full screen this for you.
Mr. Jutras, from what's up on the screen, you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And as far as the view from this camera, this is from the library, is that correct?
Correct.
And so as far as what we're looking at here, this is the view from the camera as you observed it on the security camera and as you provided it to the correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, sir, do you have is there a laser pointer up on the desk in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with this area as far as the area of Canton?
Yes, yes. Town Hall is right across the street.
And I'm sorry, I stepped right over your words when you were saying that.
Yeah, so Town Hall is right across the street, and the intersection here is at Sherman, and this is Washington, the longer street that you'll see.
So Washington sort of runs parallel with the street, and then Sherman is the street that appears to intersect with Washington
Correct.
in the area of the town hall.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So if you could take that down and just put up the 5 to 6.
The time on that was 12 o'clock a.m.
What's up on the screen, do you recognize that?
Yes.
Is this essentially the video that you provided to the troopers or retrieved from the Canton Town Library from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. later on that day, January 20th?
Yes, sir.
And the orientation as far as Washington Street, Sherman Street, that's all the same in reference to the earlier, the camera hasn't moved.
Correct.
Thank you. You can take that. I may have one moment, Charlie.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jutras.
Good afternoon, Attorney.
So confirming the state police, when they contacted you, asked for 2 hours of video footage, right? Between 12 and 1 a.m. on January 29th and between 5 and 6 a.m. on January 29th, correct?
Yes, sir.
You pulled that video footage, or at least arranged for it to be pulled for the state police, correct?
Yes.
And I believe your testimony was that you checked the beginning time and the ending time to make sure that you had the right time periods for those 2 hours, correct?
Yes.
But you did not sit down and watch 1 hour of snow falling and or cars driving by the public library, correct?
That is correct.
Didn't
I
do
did
that
not.
for between 12 and 1 or between 5 and 6.
Correct. I did
All
not.
And at the time that you provided the video footage to the state police, Did you know whether or not there was any missing footage within those 2 hours?
No, because again, I did not play every single second of the video.
Understood. It's fair to say, and you're certain that you did not cut out any of the video footage in those 2 time periods, correct?
Correct. It's motion activated. That's the only piece.
You provided the state police with the raw footage as it existed in your possession at that time, correct?
Yes.
And at that time, you knew that the raw footage was only saved for between 30 and 60 days?
That one is less than 30, yes.
Less than 30 days.
Now, as of early February, when you were dealing with the state police, you knew that Karen Reed had been arrested and charged in court, correct?
I do not recall if I had that information.
You knew that there had been a police officer found dead on the lawn of another police officer in Canton?
At that time in February, I believe so.
And that likely would have been discussed when the state police called you?
I do not recall the conversation other than asking for video footage for Washington Street.
And I'm sorry, sir, if you could just keep if I can't hear you, I guarantee you that these last jurors can't hear you. Could you
No
just
problem.
repeat that last question?
Yep, again, when in the conversation with it, we had the dates and the timeframes, and anything else relative to it, I do not recall specifically what
Oh, okay.
conversation.
So you don't have a memory of why you were being asked for this?
Correct. I know it was for a motor vehicle accident. Who and what, I do not recall if that was ever mentioned specifically.
Okay. And you would agree with me that as the IT director, you had the ability, if you wanted to download the footage onto some hard drive to preserve it, if you wanted to do that?
Yes.
Did any state trooper ever ask you to download and preserve that footage so that it would exist longer than that 30 to 60-day period?
No.
And so it's fair to say you did not do that, correct?
Correct.
You complied with what they asked you to do.
Yes.
Now, skipping ahead to April 6th of 2023, you were contacted by Michael Proctor, a state trooper investigating this matter, correct?
I do not recall.
Do you recall Michael Proctor asking you to provide to the defense in this case the same raw footage you had previously provided to the state police?
No.
And you don't recall telling him that you couldn't do that because after 30 to 60 days, the footage is gone, correct?
I had a phone call with what I thought was Trooper Dunn asking for another copy of the data and telling him that I did not have it and I couldn't recreate it.
I see. Oh, so you assume
If it was Proctor, but no, I thought I was speaking with Trooper Dunn.
Trooper Dunn was the name that you remembered from February.
Correct. That was the first interaction I had.
And when
Yes.
they mentioned state police, you assumed it was the same state police trooper, correct?
Yes.
It's fair to say that once you shared the footage with the state police in February of 2022,
Mhm.
You didn't control what they did with it after that, correct?
Correct.
And you have no personal knowledge about how they preserved it or didn't preserve it, correct?
I'll allow it. Do you have any idea?
No.
And one last question. You cannot testify about whether any video was removed from the footage after you provided it, correct?
Objection.
This tape.
Nothing further. Thank you.
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right, sir, you are all set.
Gary says they're trying to replace Proctor with Dunn. Got it.
I do not, Your Honor, no.
Oh, he has no more
May we approach
witnesses.
just on?
That was a Dave Matthews reference in case you didn't get it. The song, Turn, Turn, We Almost Become Dizzy. Okay, that was very interesting. He didn't doctor or proctor any of the footage. It was only available for less than 30 days, so
You are
if they requested it after that, they couldn't get it.
unmuted.
In fairness, I didn't tell the lawyers that I was hoping to go until 4:30 today. And I understand this sometimes happens.
Oh, we can't blame Lally.
Law enforcement witnesses, they get called away. So that's it for today. Now, next week, I would like to go as much as we possibly can on the days that we're here for full days. So Monday is a full day. I would like to go until 4:30 if everybody can with the shortened lunch hour. Tuesday, we're not in session. Wednesday is a full day again. We'll go right till 4:30 with the shortened lunch. Thursday is a half day, maybe even closer to 12. And Friday, we will not be in session.
What?
Those are dates that we gave you before. So we will get as much done as we possibly can during that.
Are you kidding me?
Okay, so those same cautions, please do not discuss this case with
Is this-
anyone. Don't do any independent research or
Is this the summer
investigation
schedule?
into this case.
Oh, I'm
If
turning you off because now you're making me mad. You're making me mad, Judge. Really? Summer schedule? Is that what we're doing? Is it like weekends in the Hamptons, except maybe over there they go to the Cape? Weekends in the Hamptons? Okay, so this is it for this week. This was the only day of trial. They were going to go till 4:30, but Lally didn't have another witness ready. So next week, apparently, there's only court on Monday, full day until 4:30, because that's a full day in Dedham, in Norfolk Superior. Tuesday, no court. Wednesday, full day until 4:30, maybe a shortened lunch hour. Thursday, half a day, maybe only until 12. And Friday, no court. We really literally are going to be here until Labor Day. Are you flipping kidding me? Yeah, so no court next Tuesday or Friday. So no court June 4th or June 7th. Initially, when she told us all these days off, she said that June 7th was a day off. I don't remember her saying June 4th. I tried to put it in my calendar because I too, since I'm live streaming this trial, would like to plan my life and my schedule. So there we go. That's that. Welcome to Half Day Summers. Memorial Day is upon us, and now the summer begins, apparently, for the court system. And a woman is on trial for murder. Okay? Facing potentially life in prison. So, let's just futz around a little, shall we? And waste more of the jurors' time. They've already been told that they had to give up at least 8 or 9 weeks of their life for this trial. But hey, let's just, work a half-assed type schedule. It's infuriating. Al, thank you so much for the 10. Riddle me this. If the defense proves that there was a cover-up, doesn't that now make all of Detective Proctor's prior cases open for appeal? Again, if they prove that he was part of a cover-up. Yeah, that's why they got to be real careful with him. And that's why there's some rumblings around today that maybe they may not be calling him. If they don't call him, their case falls apart. If they do call him, their case falls apart, meaning the Commonwealth. So what are we doing here? Why are we here? Please, in the chat, give me some Twilight Zone emojis. Please, members. We have special emojis just for this trial, including solo cups, puffy jackets, a fan, what if any, lies, yeah. And Twilight Zone emojis, because we are all in the Twilight Zone. There's an Alice emoji in there too, because call me Alice. I fell into this Karen Reed rabbit hole before January, and I've never come out. I'm still down there. So call me Alice. Dawn, thanks for your 10. Melanie, I'm not a lawyer. Does Lally have a strategy to kill the defense with mounds of information that isn't relevant, or am I giving him too much credit? You're giving him too much credit because the defense has all of this information. He may be trying to confound the jury or to just throw spaghetti at the wall, hoping that maybe something will stick. But I think the jury is smarter than that, because when are we going to start seeing evidence that Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe with her car? We saw Dr. Justin Rice testify, the emergency room doctor who was the attending on call in the ER when John O'Keefe came into the emergency room. He did not note any injuries to John O'Keefe's ribs, torso, legs, knees, or ankles. None. And he called the marks on his right forearm abrasions that he defined as scratches. Lindsay, thanks for the 5, right? So Karen was somewhere between slightly buzzed and into a coma near death. Okay, Lally, you're done. Take a seat. Right. And that witness, I think, was one of the most credible that we saw today. His name was Nicholas Roberts, right? He was the gentleman who at the time worked in forensics at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, who was given the serum results, just a piece of paper from the Good Samaritan ER for the serum blood results, and extrapolated that back to come up with some ridiculous swing of blood alcohol content results. And look, he was so honest. He's like, yeah, if the time they gave me of her last drink was wrong and the time of the incident was wrong, like these results mean nothing. And I thought it was a big W today for the defense. Tell me what you think in the comments and in the chat. So yes, he said that according to his extrapolation results, because it was serum and not whole blood, which is normally used in blood alcohol BAC results, that it was somewhere between 0.13 and 0.29. So somewhere between really drunk and almost dead, basically, because the Commonwealth gave him an incident time of 12:45 a.m. So yeah, there's that. Alma, thank you so much for the $10 super sticker. I appreciate you so much. And Kathy Todd, thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate you. Shayna, thanks for becoming a member. Shayna Rothenberg. Mrs. Bucket, thank you for your super sticker. Paige became a member. Welcome, Paige. Think you're going to like it here. Laura, hi, Laura. Thanks for the super chat. Been in meeting. Sounds like I may need to go back. Oh, you're going to need to go back. It was a full day of stuff today, packed full of information. On top, thank you for your super sticker so very much. Miss Carrie says, did they ask her to blow or just drew blood? No. In fact, they didn't even suspect her of drunk driving at the scene because they sent her home. They told Carrie Roberts to take her home. And then about 5 minutes later, they called Carrie Roberts and said, bring her back. We're going to section her, because they say her father or mother called Canton PD and said they were worried about her, that she had suicidal, said something like she didn't want to live if John was dead, and somebody else heard her say that too. We don't really know, but they took her to the hospital in an ambulance, put her on a Section 12 hold, but then they released her shortly thereafter. So the blood results were not taken specifically for blood alcohol content for drunk driving, as they would be by a trooper or someone from the crime lab. They were taken secondary to her being sectioned or an involuntary hold to see if she had any alcohol or drugs in her system. But I think that the cross-examination pretty much destroyed, I mean, not the pathologist, he was honest, but he said, look, this is not what we do here. We do not do alcohol results for legal purposes. It's not what we do. Hi, Ben. I wonder if they have any type of checklist they use to provide proof, protocols, and policies are followed. Yeah, with regard to the blood draw and stuff like that, I think is what you're going back to. So that's where we stand right now, my friends. We heard from a lot of witnesses today. Thank you, Commander Ed, for buying me a matcha latte. And he says, you're going to need this. I absolutely do. Thank you so very much. And Joey, thank you for buying me a matcha latte. And Joey says, I think the last witness has an opinion on the case that Karen did it. I'm sure he knows about the case, but doesn't know all the details and isn't strong in his opinion. But that is why I guess he was confrontational with the defense. And Joseph, you sent me this at 1:41, so I'm not sure which witness you were talking about. That would have been the first witness after lunch. Was that the ER doc? They're all blending together at this point, my friends. All blending together. But we saw Brian Higgins this morning for a little while. We saw Dr. Justin Rice, the ER doctor that we just talked about, who attended to Officer O'Keefe and apparently Karen Reed in the emergency room, but he doesn't remember anything about Karen Reed or even treating Karen Reed. Dr. Garrey Faller, he was the pathologist at Good Sam. He told us a lot about the procedures and protocols. He also said, that's not what we do here. We're not in the business of taking blood alcohol results to be used in court. We heard from Nicholas Roberts, who was the forensics expert from Massachusetts State Police, but he doesn't work there anymore. He's the one who did the extrapolation. Michael Trotta, very older man, let's say, who was the superintendent at the Canton Department of Public Works for over 30 years or something, who testified that he had a phone call with Proctor and he thinks he told him that Brian or Lucky Lochran was the plow driver of Fairview that night. And then he was shown some papers. And he said, do these look to be the same? And he said, yes. And we didn't get any further into that. That was Michael Trotta. And then the last witness was a Louis Jutras. He was the IT guy from the town of Canton who provided the footage, the surveillance footage that he said works on motion. It's motion activated. And they only asked for footage, Proctor or Gallagher or Dunn, whoever requested it from him, between midnight and 1 a.m. and 5 and 6 a.m. from the camera by the library and town hall. And then there was some talk about a camera from Pescatide Farm, but we never heard anything more than that. He said he never looked at the footage. He just pulled it and gave it to him, and that it is only maintained for less than 30 days. So he was cross-examined and said, so you didn't doctor any of this footage, did you? You didn't cut anything out. And he said, no, just downloaded it and gave it to him on a thumb drive. So interesting testimony for today. But now we find out that next week, because there's no more court this week, it's only Tuesday. What are we going to do, my friends? Please put in the comments what you would like to do with me this week, because, my schedule just suddenly freed up. And then next week, Monday is a full day, Tuesday, no court, full day Wednesday, half day Thursday until noon, and then no court on Friday because it's the summer and everyone wants to go to their summer house, or maybe the judge does because we know she has a house on the Cape. And that, does the Commonwealth send the jury to a spa from now until next week? They should. I agree with you. I think they should too. I think they're entitled to go to a spa. It's hot as hell in there. And in fact, they actually, one of the witnesses wasn't speaking up loud enough, that poor man. And she chastised him several times and said, if you don't speak louder, I'm going to have to turn off the fans and the jury's going to get really hot in here. It's getting hot in here. And then she did turn the fans off. He was a low talker. You can't blame him for being a low talker. Get the air conditioning working. They just got Wi-Fi like right before the trial started in this courthouse. And thank you, Chris. Thank you so very much for the Venmo. Says great work on this trial. Thank you. You guys are very super generous. Super fun crowd here, super loyal, and I appreciate you all so very, very much. Well, I have been speaking, like I told you, to Natalie, the lawyer chick. If you have not checked out her coverage on this case, she is a full-time practicing public defender in Maryland, and her reactions to this case have been recapped in Aussie Insider's compilation videos that we've been taking a look at, and also she's done a stream or two with Uncivil Law, and her reactions are priceless. If you have not checked out Natalie, the lawyer chick, check her out. We're going to do something this weekend, I think, together, because she got back to me and said she'd love to do something with me. So I'm all about girl power. I did a church with I did a stream with Brandy Churchwell as well. Check her out too. She's done a whole podcast called Conspiracy in Canton, all about this case. And we're all about supporting each other here on the As Such YouTube. For creators who are kind to each other. It's really nice. So check out Natalie, the lawyer chick. Hopefully subscribe. It's free. Hit that little subscribe button. Hit the bell so you know when I go live, because we're going to be having a wonky schedule for the rest of the week through Monday. You don't want to miss a thing, my friends. I do not think you want to miss a thing. And as I always say, thank you to the moderators for keeping the chat classy. It's been a very long day. We had at least 5 hours this morning and almost 3 this afternoon. So thank you so much, my moderators. I love each and every one of you. I know this case is a really hard one to keep classy, but I think that we have done an excellent job. To all of you who are in the chat, who feel supported, welcomed, and safe here. You guys are what makes this channel great, and I couldn't do it without you. To all my channel members who like me enough to want to be little cupcakes, thank you so very much for joining my channel. To the viewers and replay viewers, you guys are the best. Please hit the thumbs up on the way out. It helps the algorithm. And as I always say, my friends, at the end of every stream, remember, be cool, be kind, be classy. It is not hard. Really, it is so not hard. I promise you, you will thank me for it. Peace. I'm sure I'm going to see you real soon. So hit that bell so you don't miss out. Good night, everyone. And let's go Rangers. Woo! Oh, Celtics too. All right. Good night, everyone.